lifestyle. Sports cards and we live now. Jeremy Lee in the building and every guest that you ever needed. Sports cards after hours keep the hobby heated. Updates, hobby talk like you never seen it. Sports cards live and none could ever beat it. Sports cards is a lifestyle. Sports cards and we live now. Welcome to another episode of Sports Cards Live with your host, Jeremy Lee.
All right, everybody, what is going on? Welcome to episode 249 of Sports Cards Live. It's Saturday night, November the 30th, 2024. My name is Jeremy Lee. Oh, please. Okay, that's okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Guys, tomorrow night, Fanatics Collect Weekly with Josh Madigan of the Hockey Cards Gong Show will be joining me here on the channel. Always a fun night tomorrow. And I want to also call your attention to this past Wednesday, did a Sports Cards Light episode here on the channel with Craig Hartman. We talked about reclassifying the eras, the periods of the hobby. It was a pretty fun discussion. You might want to check it out if you missed it, guys. Couple of sponsor shout outs. Filth Bomb Breaks offers live case and box breaks. They do so with responsibility and integrity. If you enjoy box breaks and you're looking for a company to break with, check out Filth Bomb, streaming on Fanatics Live on 4 channels, 7 days per week. And if you're looking to add a grail to your collection, make sure you check out Fund Your Cards, the hobby's leading consolidator. They will help you finance the purchase of your cards with your own cards. Visit fundyourcards.com and check out the Fund Your Cards show here on the Sports Cards Live YouTube channel. And finally, Mint Inc. is a leading hobby brand in Canada. And guys, I went to the store earlier this month. And oh my goodness, what an amazing place it is. They offer live shopping, online shopping, breaking, grading, just about everything you can think of. And we will be giving away the $50 Mint Inc. gift card tonight on the show. And check out hobbynewsdaily.com. Danny Black, who runs that website as well as Sports Illustrated Collect website, will be joining us tonight as well. And Leighton Sheldon will be coming from Just Collect 2. And guys, this show is available on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Please follow and subscribe for free and leave a rating or review. Would greatly appreciate it. And thank you, as always, to all of our loyal viewers and listeners. Please subscribe if you have not done that yet. And as always, your comments, your questions are in play.
Let the games begin.
Trying some new things, you know. We'll see how it goes. All right, guys, let's bring out Joe Poirot. What's up, buddy? How are you?
I'm doing well, Jeremy. How are you tonight?
I'm doing good, Joe. I'm doing good. We had a fun show last week. We're coming back again this week. We have a few people that are going to be joining us. So Dan the Card Man just let me know he's at a card show in Australia as we speak because it's like a different day there right now. And he just said he's having internet trouble, having trouble even taking payments. So we'll see if he's able to join us. We're going to have John Mangini join us, the hobby president, very, very soon. He's already in the studio. We'll bring him out shortly. Joe, you know, so one of the things I like to kick off the new SCL, the new episodes, is a little bit of a show and tell, a little bit of a, you know, what do we pick up? And I'll start. I had 2 cards come in the mail basically yesterday. They're both hockey cards, guys. And you know, I love my vintage baseball and all that too, but I also love my modern hockey. I got this gorgeous Marc-Andre Fleury patch card from 2012's The Cup. You know, I got like 438 of these cards now from all the years, and this was a really cool one. I had to grab it there. And then if you are familiar with Mika Kiprasov, you know that is a fantastic game-used patch card right there. Won these on Slab Sharks on eBay, and they just came yesterday because Slab Sharks is shipping despite the strike up here, you guys. Shipping despite the strike. Joe, you have anything you want to share? Anything you want to show?
Yeah, well, those are pretty cool there, Jared. And I haven't gotten too many recent pickups, and I've got to get better at figuring out how to share my screen because most of what I'm buying these days, I'm throwing into the vault, and usually it's modern basketball. But as you know, one of my projects lately has been kind of transferring cards out of older slabs that I've had for years and just kind of getting them kind of an update, freshened up. And I was listening actually to you and Leighton talking on the Vintage Spotlight show, which I would encourage everyone to go watch, about eye appeal. And in particular, one part of that show that I thought was really good was kind of markings and the MK designation and or just cards in some instances not getting a PSA designation, but certainly, any company is going to downgrade for a marking on a card. And but there's a lot of unique markings, and so this brought up something for me. So I'm going to undo my Island Getaway screen here just for a second.
We're going to get a look inside. Oh, look at that background.
Here's the look behind the curtain at Joe's place. But anyway, here's a Hank Greenberg, and you can see it's a 2 with an MK. It probably presents closer to like a 4, but the MK in this case is pencil on the back. And in this instance, it's not, just childlike markings. It's actually first base, and then 4, which I'm guessing might be position in the order. MG might be for manager, maybe Greenberg managed at some point. And then you can see there's a 5 right there, which is Greenberg's jersey number. So, some method to the madness of this particular marker, but this is a card I like. Here is a card I've been actually thinking of switching into a new slab that also has a mark. And Jeremy, it's one that I know you're fond of. It's the Cobb Portrait T206. And again, this would be an example of a card that looks closer probably to a 2. There's no major creases. It's got rounding of the corners, definitely has seen better days. But the reason it gets the 1, the draconian 1 from the old BVG label is this interesting marking on the back. Not only the paper loss, but what looks to be some stenciled letters there. I'm guessing it's a D and an E. I'm not quite sure the purpose. Maybe Leighton could give us some insight. Maybe it was connected to a tobacco shop that stamped cards if you were going back for extra pouches of tobacco. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, I thought this was kind of a fun example of markings that in this case are sort of historical or unique in their own way. And then this card came to mind, which this is an old caramel card that I did just crack out of a GAI case somewhat recently. And I'm not sure if you can see here, but this particular card has second base, the amazing Hall of Famer, Nap Lejeau. Not sure how to pronounce that. I probably should know, since my last name is French. I should know better. But
Mr. Mangini will help us with that. When he comes on, we'll get him to tell us how to pronounce that.
Napoleon Lejeau.
Lajoie, maybe. Lajoie. I've heard Lajoie. I've heard Lajoie.
In any case, yes. And this is, I just thought this was fascinating because I can remember taking typing classes. I'm old enough to remember that. And getting the typewriter to actually mark in the exact right place is no easy feat. So you see second base just placed in there perfectly on this particular card, which again, this card probably has the appearance of a 2, maybe a 2.5, but that's obviously going to knock it down to the 1. In fact, I was glad that they gave it a number grade at all. I wasn't sure that they would with this specific ink, and it also has some markings on the back, almost in the realm of like a checklist thing. So anyway, those were some examples that came to mind to me after watching that show with you and Leighton. And was it Chris that you were on with?
That was Maddie C on Instagram. Yeah. He was our guest on the Vintage Spotlight. Yeah, I quite liked him. And then one more, just because I was checking out the guests that we have coming on tonight, and I went on the Sports Illustrated Collect website and found Danny Black's most recent article, and he was singing praise to what he feels is the greatest set ever, the 57 Tops. And so this is a card that I actually crossed over from an old SCD label quite recently. It's a card I've had in my possession since I was a teenager, believe it or not. And I was quite happy that it actually crossed right over from a 5 to a 5. So I found that surprising. If you're not familiar with the SCD label, here's an old star card that is still in the SCD label. But anyway, I thought this was
kind of just a cool example of what I'm up to these days, which is unearthing cards that I've had in my collection for a long time and moving them out of older slabs into, in most cases, since they're vintage, I'm moving them into SGC card holders. So that's what I'm up to.
Nice, man. I love seeing that old SCD slab. I mean, when did SCD stop doing great? I mean, I'm guessing they followed Beckett's footsteps, both being Price Guide magazines. How long did they? Do you have any recollection how long they? And if not, well, maybe John will know too. But John, do you know that? Just give me a nod if you know when SCD was grading. He does. He says, okay. We'll get you on in a minute, John. All right. Those are awesome, Joe. I love seeing those old vintage baseball cards, tobacco cards and everything. Good. Nice showing there, buddy. Nice show. Balance it out. My modern hockey, your vintage baseball. Let's go to some comments, guys. Want to welcome everybody here to Sports Cards Live on Saturday night, you guys. We're going to have fun tonight. Stukes, what's up? Wild bunch tonight. Tailgate is finishing up, waiting for the action to start. What's up, Jacob Dahl? Orlando from A Collector's Dream is here. Be sure to check out his YouTube channel. Check out Stukes' YouTube channel too. Hodges, what's going on? Mookie Chilson is in the house. What's going on, Mookie? Good to see you and a pleasure to talk to you as well. Laura, good evening to you. No flag planting allowed on SCL turf. Plant your flags. That's okay. Plant your flags. No problem. Chris C., welcome to the show. Collectors World Fargo, good evening. Foul Ball, hello. Reese ND, hello. Robert Scott, good to see you. Bobby Baseball, what's up? Yoda Vintage Americana, new user I haven't seen. Welcome to the channel, Mr. Yoda. Lonely Basement Baseball Cards, good evening. Hey, well, everyone's here. Jeff McMahon, what? Yeah, Mookie. Joe is not stuck on an island. He's in his kitchen more than likely. Kinger, happy Saturday. Good to see you guys. Yit's in the house. What's happening? Jeff Hart, good to see you, Jeff. Called Shot, welcome. Double V Mike, good to see you. Terp is here. What's up, Terp? Dan is here. What's up, Dan? He says, I voted for Mangini 200 times. So was it rigged? I don't know. Hobby, it's okay. We're happy. I think he deserves to be the hobby president. Lantern is here. What's going on? Colin Murray, Rated Rabbi, David Spinrad, what's going on? And the professor is here as well. All right, Joe. Let's bring on our first participant of the night, Mr. John Man. You ready, John? You ready to go? He's ready. There he is. What's going on?
I'm ready to go.
Welcome,
Jeremy.
to the show,
Joe, how are you?
Doing well. Good. I don't know if I've met you in person, but a pleasure to make your acquaintance from afar.
Nice to meet you. Nice to look at some of those nice vintage cards.
So tell us, John, do you know SCD? When were they grading? Because I don't really remember.
I know it was at least into the early 2000s. I had some of their cards. I think I still have some of their slabs. They were one kind of, back when PSA and GAI and SGC and SCD and Beckett, those were the major ones at that time. And then you had that, what was it, FSA, I think? Was it FSA? Kind of a secondary company.
Do you remember how they were accepted by the hobby back in the day?
I mean, so, my recollection is that PSA and SGC were the big ones for vintage. And of course, Beckett at one time was the most popular for modern cards. And they were kind of like GAI. They were accepted, but kind of a secondary.
Okay. So they kind of went away. Like they never took hold. PSA, Beckett, SGC really ran with it, obviously. And that was the end of it.
Yeah, in the early days of grading, I mean, it was new to all of us. And I think people went with kind of the holders they liked the most initially. Yeah. I know I did. That's why I went with SGC. I just thought it looked more museum quality for my vintage cards.
Yeah. The SCD holder actually kind of looked like it. That label kind of looked a bit like magazine text or type, if you will. Yeah. So listen, let's go back, John, to last Saturday where we had the show on here and we were talking, we were talking about vintage modern cards and we had a comment in the chat. Someone put a comment in the chat that basically said the modern hobby is a joke. And I'm trying to see who put that in there last week. I forget. And then Brent, who is known as the Pareto guy. He's known as deep value investor. He couldn't come on tonight. He's at a football game with his son. We were trying to get him on so we could have that discussion. But he kind of went on a bit of a rant talking about how, I'm sick of hearing that the modern hobby is a scam. What about the vintage hobby? So I actually have that teed up here. Maybe we can remind ourselves and watch what he said. Watch and listen to what he said. And let me see here.
Hey, while you're teeing that up, can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
I'll show you a 1909 Dockman and Son, and it's Nap Ladjeway.
There we go. Thank you.
Yeah, and there's a lot of familiar names in the chat that I know, and many of my friends. So, thanks for the support. Yeah,
well, and thank you for letting people know that you were going to be here. And if you are, joining because you are a friend of John's, and I know many of you are. I know he's got tons of friends in the hobby. I just want to welcome you. If it's your first time on the Sports Cards Live YouTube channel, I just want to say welcome, and I hope you enjoy our evening tonight. So let me see if I can do this. I'm sharing this in a bit of a different way. Let's see if I pull this up. All right. So there is last week's video. You can see there you got me, Joe, you got Cage on the screen, and Brent in the bottom. I'm going to hit play. You should be able to hear this, and let's listen to what Brent says. And then I want you to, and then your comment is down below, and then we'll let you kind of talk about what you were thinking. So here we go, everybody.
I was gonna say, how is the modern hobby a joke when you got vintage cards that are trimmed everywhere, where you got PSA 10s of Mickey Mantle 52 tops that are known as trimmed and no one cares? When you have cards that are not rare or scarce, and they're only rare or scarce if you give them a grade, and then the grades are all over the place and make no sense, and grades given by PSA 5 or 10 years ago are not in line with grades given now. Like, to say the modern hobby is a joke and act as if vintage cards are somehow not also a joke in many ways. Or how about the IP autos on vintage cards, where we're supposed to all just believe that they're actually signed by these guys? Have you ever seen how much time a grader takes on authenticating an autograph on a card? You're supposed to make me believe that every single Mantle that's been IP autoed, they're all legit because someone took 30 to 60 seconds to look at a Mantle auto and be like, oh, it looks the same. Yep, looks good. They're not authenticated by anything, not even by the card company. And people are spending tons of money on IP autos of vintage cards that are signed by players supposedly 10, 20, 30 years ago. And we're just supposed to all believe that they're signed by those players. So to sit there and bash on modern cards and act as if they're a joke when the hobby with vintage cards is full of trimmed and altered cards that have been cosmetically adjusted, IP autos, that an IP auto of a vintage card is an altered card. It should be slapped altered. So like, it's hilarious to sit there and make fun of the modern hobby as if you're on some sort of like high horse of your vintage cards. Because I think I've had enough of that also. It just makes me laugh every time.
All right. So we heard that, what he had to say. John, you remember that comment? I'm going to just scroll down to what you wrote, if that's okay, your comment on the channel here.
Yeah, well, let's lead this off with my friend Rick, Vintage Oddball Cards, is the one that made a comment, and he said something along the lines of the modern hobby is a joke. And that's what I was responding to. And Cage got it right. Like, this guy jumped to conclusions, and what Rick meant, he was talking about the modern hobby, not modern cards. And Cage, that was his take. And I think he got it right. And so I've heard him talk badly about us older collectors in the past, which is one of the reasons that triggered my comment as well.
Okay. And so now that we don't even have to look at the comment you wrote. Is there anything else about that? Because listen, we're all in this. What do we need to have a vintage versus modern, or is
no, we don't. It's ridiculous. But so, judging by his age, he wasn't, I don't think he was collecting in the 80s. I don't think he was collecting in the 90s. I don't think he was collecting in the early 2000s. And yet he makes the claim that there was as much scamming and shenanigans going on back then as there are today. And that's just not the case. Now, being older and having collected for decades doesn't make you more intelligent. but it does make you wiser, because experience makes you wiser. And we all lived through this. And there are a lot of newer collectors that jumped on the bandwagon during the COVID boom because everybody was telling them they could become millionaires flipping cards. And they became experts in 5 minutes, which is fine. Everybody could do what they want to do, but you can't rewrite history and just make stuff up. There were certainly some shenanigans going on in the old days. Cage pointed to the fact that the first graded card was trimmed, the Hannes Wagner. And there were certainly some bad actors, but not like today. I mean, we might have had some card soaking, but we didn't have everybody in their mom's basement buying Kurt's Card Care to try to get over on PSA. What my comment was, when he was talking about all these problems with vintage cards, I agreed with a lot of what he said. I agreed with a lot of it. But what he was saying about the vintage cards is he was really talking about grading of vintage cards, scamming of vintage cards, getting over on the grading companies. Because if you can get over on PSA, the card's trusted, right? If I'm taking Kurt's Card Care and I'm cleaning it up, if I'm trimming it and I'm getting over on PSA, if I'm getting fake autos, I agree with him 100% on his autograph talk. I agreed with him on most of what he said. But to say that there were just as many bad actors in the hobby in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, no, there weren't. That's just flat out wrong. And let's just say that if there's only 1% of bad actors in the hobby, well, we have 10 times the people in the hobby today that we did back then. So just by a straight percentage, which I think I made a point in my comment, just by a straight percentage, you're going to, if all things are equal and there's only 1% bad actors, there was then and there was now, you're going to have more bad actors today because there are more people today. And 1% of more is more.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Like, absolute numbers are definitely higher now than back then. And then I guess kind of the question I have is, what is being targeted more? Because vintage cards may be easier to alter, manipulate, versus modern cards, which are produced so much in such higher quality of paper and cardstock. Obviously, the world has come a long way since vintage. So, is any of the hobby a scam, or are they kind of saying that the grading of them is a scam? I don't think grading is a scam. Scam isn't the right word for any. I mean, some people might disagree.
Here's the thing.
Scam is a better word.
Here's the thing. Grading companies, their business model is similar to a home security system. It's similar to title lock, in that it's really about fear and your security, right? So, because if you trusted all cards, you wouldn't really need to grade them. So when cards that are known to be trimmed, like from Evan Mathis, or cards that are known to be cleaned, like the Wemby card that was sold, and PSA's grading them, and then that's where people think it's a scam. So do you have any more warm and fuzzy that a card in a slab hasn't been altered than you do a raw one these days? Because the thing is going back to my analogy, or my comparison, I should say, with the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, and now, is this amount of money wasn't in the hobby back then. Now, to get that 10, you might make 10,000, 100,000, $1 million more on it than you would a 9 or an 8. And so there's way more reason to alter these cards today, because you're going to make that big bang.
Yeah.
And so what does that draw in? It draws in the scammers and the bad actors.
There's so much more inexperience in the hobby now, since COVID and all that it's, you talk about getting something over on somebody. The marks are plentiful right now in terms of people that can be taken advantage, that are learning as they get into the hobby. And that's one of the reasons why it's just, so important to get out there, talk to people, soak in as much knowledge as you can. If you're new, I have a feeling most people tuned in here right now are pretty experienced in the hobby. So we're probably able to protect ourselves, but we can still make mistakes sometimes. Sometimes things look too good to be true, but you want it to be that good. So you kind of, take that leap of faith, right? It's interesting. I want to ask you a couple other questions here. But let's just go to some comments before we fall too far behind. I want to say hi to Jacob Dahl. Orlando shouts out BVG is another grading brand, I suppose, but obviously one of the Beckett grading services. Chris from Missouri. What's going on, Chris? Welcome to the show. Kinger says you need to crack it all. Dan says that John is one of the most authentic guys in the hobby, incredibly knowledgeable and a really good guy. Yeah. And by the way, to Dan, I just watched on Dan's channel and check it out. He did an interview with Leighton Sheldon, who comes on here quite a bit and will be joining us shortly, I'm sure. And I thought that was a great interview that you did with Leighton there, Dan. Andrew says, this is why he's our hobby president. Bob Boozle, President Mangini is about to press the red button. It cometh a egg. Welcome to the show, Mid-Atlantic. Good to see you. People chasing views is all. Define older collector, says Bink Scott. I think he might be saying that because you said some of us older collectors. What do you define as an older collector, John?
Well, and the only point I was making is if you've been in the hobby for decades, you've seen more. You've it's just experience. So older collector, I mean, somebody that's been around for a while.
What do you?
That doesn't take away. It's not a knock on anybody that's newer. I don't mean that at all. I just mean that I've heard some of the newer collectors say they wish us older collectors would die so they could have the hobby to themselves. I've heard that guy call us arrogant before, and I don't know. When I was growing up, I was taught to respect my elders and to learn from them. When I got into business, I wanted to listen to all the old successful business people. I didn't want to listen to people who were living in their mom's basement just starting a business. I wanted to listen to people that did it. Yeah. So somehow that's changed. And I just hear people talk so much smack on us older collectors.
Yeah, and I don't think it's necessarily like how many years you've been on the earth. It comes down to your experience in the hobby. I think like you were thinking, and somebody could have come into the hobby 5 years ago and put in 16 hours a day and maybe catch up to somebody who put in 4 hours a day 20 years ago for 20 years, and they could be at the same point. So it's hard to use.
That's right.
Right? Like,
that's absolutely right. I mean, in 5 years, you can learn a great deal.
Right. How committed are you? How entrenched are you? Different ways to look at it for sure. So there's no really one size fits all.
I just want to say a lot of the experienced collectors, during when COVID born channels came on, selling information is a big business. And I just think there were a lot of people selling their information and knowledge before they had it. You can't be a 5-minute expert. People who truly know what they're doing aren't selling you on their ideas. You don't see Elon Musk doing seminars telling you how to start a business. You don't see Warren Buffett on YouTube telling you how to invest in stocks. The people that do that, that's their business. But you should have some experience and success before you're an expert. That's all I'm saying.
I think that's fair. I think I don't think anyone will argue with you on that. And we'll get Brent will come back on the show and he'll address these things, and let's see if we can find some common ground. Perhaps I don't think we're dealing with any unreasonable people here. Bob Boozle says President Mangini to place massive tariffs on the modern hobby. Bink said a lot of egos in the hobby, unfortunately. Yeah, I mean that's life.
Well, right? That's true too. And for the record, I collect modern, I collect all sports, I collect all eras.
Yeah. Hey,
so I never knock modern cards. I collect them. But I think he misconstrued Rick's comment. That's all I was saying. He kind of went off on vintage versus modern, and he didn't mean it that way. He just meant like we trade back and forth with eBay listings of all these fake cards that are selling for thousands of dollars. Clear fakes that eBay allows on there. And the paradox of card grading is this. The more you collect graded cards, the more you don't know what real cards look like, feel like, smell like. And so it's making you dumber because you've never actually touched a card. You don't know what the card stock's like. So it's easier to get scammed if you ever buy raw ones.
You don't have the experience for sure. Yeah. I like that. I mean, I can still smell the gum and the cardboard opening up card packs in the 80s. I'm not old enough to have opened up many wax packs in the 70s. Probably zero, but early 80s, 80, 81. I remember that smell, dude.
It's like do you know the card stock of the Oxford
the light flour on the cards themselves? Do you remember that?
Yeah, absolutely. A little powder there.
Yeah.
the gum.
What
But
were you
like,
gonna
do
say?
you know the card stock of the Oxford confectionery cards?
Not off the top of my head.
Like
No.
probably
No.
most people never touched one, but they're very thin. You
It's
know, a
like
lot of times the reprints are clearly don't have the same stock as the originals, but you wouldn't know that if you've never touched a card.
Right. No, exactly. Exactly. All right, let's go through some more comments. Leighton's in the studio. We're going to bring you on, Leighton, in just about 2 minutes. Hang tight, buddy. And I want you to remember what John was just saying, because we got some good stuff there. But Terp here does say, in my dealings, vintage collectors have been rude to me when I tell them my modern collection. That's interesting. Too bad, because I don't think you'd get that from every vintage collector.
That's terrible. That's terrible.
It's terrible. Yeah, there's no excuse for that. I mean, if they're rude to you, they're rude to everybody. So screw them. Really.
Yeah, that's a problem with them personally.
Yeah. Vintage card collectors, wisdom equals knowledge applied. I like that. Splendid says, John is in the Pareto of hobby great guys. Not going to argue with that. Bob Boozle says, sports non-illustrated news alert, President John Mangini to ban Pareto principle from the hobby. Love it. Mookie says, John's been eating burritos since the 70s. People are liking your points, John. You got Chris C., Collectors World Fargo, liking what you're saying. Professor says, John's point about being wise is spot on. In AI, we teach that machines can acquire knowledge, but acquiring wisdom is far off into the ultra future. And the professor is an AI professional. Chris says, grading is a cash grab. I would not call it a scam. It's important to know certain cards are authentic, like 84 Star Jordan, for example. And Terp says, grading is subjective to the grader. How do people resend without cleaning and get higher grades? Yeah, I mean, I mean, people always say, why don't you send that back in? You'll get a better grade. It's like, yeah. I don't want to pay them to do the job twice.
Well, that's the other thing with modern cards specifically. You know, when grading came out for the vintage cards, it made a lot of sense because these are old cards that had been handled. And to put a grade on them and judge them by that, rather than some guy saying, you know, some dealer saying it's near mint, made a lot of sense, right? And for authenticity. Modern cards I've always just shaken my head at because unless you damage them, they all come out of the pack near perfect. And you and I guarantee you can't tell the difference between a 9 and a 10. And I guarantee you PSA can't tell the difference. Otherwise, you couldn't resubmit and get, 10s out of 9s so often if they could tell the difference. So it's kind of silly. And then, a lot of us find it silly how much people pay up for that 10 when you can't tell the difference. And you probably can't even tell the difference between an 8 and a 10, if we're being honest.
That is the correct answer. There
you go. All right, let's bring Leighton on, guys. Leighton's been sitting there listening. I'm sure he's gonna have a few things to add to this discussion. John, here we go. Leighton Sheldon, Just Collect. What's going on, buddy? How are you? Have you been listening to the last few minutes?
I have. Thanks for having me, Jeremy. What's going on, John? What's up, Joe?
How are you?
Good to
Great,
see
thanks.
you.
How about yourselves?
We're good. We're good. So what do you think of all that? Like, Leighton, like you are always treasure hunting for new, fresh to hobby cards, and the touch, the look, feel, the smell. Is that something that you do enjoy? That do you rely on it? How does that work into what you do day to day?
Well, it's experience. So I mean, listen, no one likes talking about their losses, but I'll start off with that. I remember, the first summer that I was able to have a vehicle. I was about 17, and my dad, and I quote, said I could have the extra car we had for the summer. For the summer, we had a minivan. So I had a few dollars in my pocket, and I'm telling you, I advertised. It was very cheap in the newspaper. I drove everywhere. My dad didn't check the mileage till the end of the summer. He goes, you put how many effing miles on the car? And I'm like, listen, whoa. You said I could do as I saw fit with the car in regards to sports cards. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is that summer, man, I bought a fake autograph collection. I definitely bought fake Cracker Jacks. And so I'm not sitting here to share that with you and saying that proudly. That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm saying is because no one bats 1,000. So you're absolutely right that there's some things that happen with experience. And so That was one of those L's, those losses, but it did absolutely teach me a lot. And I made sure that I was willing to lose a deal before I was willing to lose that kind of money again. And so it taught me a lot. And so you're right, experience does matter, but I wanted to share with you, even though I've been doing it for a long time, that even though I've been doing it for a long time, I still started somewhere, and somewhere it wasn't with perfection.
Now, Leighton, you are mostly, if not almost exclusively, a vintage guy. And, this conversation all started because of some comments that were made last week about, modern hobbies a scam, or, that kind of thing. Are there any reasons why you do not get into vintage in your business or collect it yourself? Are you afraid of it in any way? Not like you, I know you're experienced and smart enough to handle, but is it just something you don't want to learn more about? What is it about vintage that you love so much? And I mean, the other thing I just want to say is, because there are, potential downfalls in all aspects of the hobby, a guy like you is very valuable for counsel and advice. But I'm just curious about your avoidance of modern. What's behind that?
Oh, I don't necessarily avoid it. I just think that I'm kind of like Knish and Rounders. I know what my lane is. I try not to be irresponsible with that lane. I still acquire knowledge as I go, even decades later. And to be very clear, if you go into my eBay store, just_collect, yes, shameless plug, I do have some modern cards there. And it's because I do believe in the whole idea of collecting. And candidly, I don't think my son's in the other room. He collects one-piece cards. We just submitted our first batch to PSA. I never thought that I was going to do that, but yet it's something that really interests him and he's passionate about it. So what I'm saying is, I don't sit in any sort of council or box or governing body that says modern is no good and vintage is good. No, if you were asking me as to why I deal with this vintage mainly for a living, and getting back to the Knish comment, because I love Rounders, and I would love to see that franchise come back. But getting back to center for a second, in regards to the vintage cards, I just know that I could be out of the loop for a few days, a week, a couple weeks, for a variety of different reasons, whether it be vacation, I'm taking some personal time, whatever the case may be, and I can come back, and I just know inevitably the swings are going to be less than it's going to be if you're buying the latest and greatest, Wemby rookies, or even the 84 Star Jordan, which, by the way, I love that card. But that's not generally happening with Clemente rookies. They don't go like that. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. It just is. And so for someone that does this trading, and I want to make sure that the assets that I'm not only sitting on, but also that I'm going to continue to buy and sell, I don't need to sell it when I'm on the way out of the guy's house, or when I just got the package in. I need to be on the other line. Oh my God, I got to move this. I don't want to run my life like that. But everyone should choose the direction that they would like.
Yeah. Bob Boozler here said, modern card pricing fluctuates a lot more than vintage, so there is more risk in it for sure. And then Jeff Derrico here says, not true on the cards coming out of the packs in perfect condition. Many new releases have QC issues that make having a gem mint card quite rare. And I do think Jeff is correct on that. However, it's minuscule, I would say, compared to the old days when quality control wasn't even an issue. Back, right? It didn't even matter. It was they didn't even think about the condition overall. Orlando says fantastic advice all around. Some great comments here in the chat so far. Before we go to more comments, so I want to go back to you, John. Leighton just shared a bunch of information and you were nodding along. Anything stick out to you there?
No, just that there's a man who has wisdom that I was talking about. And one of my favorite quotes is from Nietzsche: that which doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And that's what comes with getting your head pounded in sometimes.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. John, I want to ask you this now also, and this is totally unrelated to the topic at hand, but, hobby president, what does that mean to you? How did that come about? Tell us a little bit about you being hobby president. Is it something that you're going to lean into, or are you kind of leaning away from?
Well, no, I've been leaning into it and having some fun with it, and I have a contest that just ended, and we're going to do a live and kick around ideas that everybody has been presented, just a way to get voices heard, get ideas out there. I mean, Sports Card Radio started this thing. I don't know if it was a joke or what, and they were putting some people up there, and then Mike Petty nominated me, and I got my name on there. And what it really truly means to me is that people rallied around me because I'm a collector. I think that's what it was. I think it was an anti, get rich quick scheme, investment type kind of channel vote is what I think happened. I think it was like collectors just felt like they had somewhat of a say again. You know what I mean? Because it had kind of passed us by. I've seen a big shift now where, people are starting to listen to us a little more, where it was almost like nobody cared about the collectors, even if they were selling to us. They still, it was almost like they talked down to us. They took us for granted. And this is what, like when people were talking smack on all of us vintage, I'm like, we're the ones who buy all your cards. Well, why would you talk smack on your customers? I don't get it. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to bring up a quick comment here.
The following moments may contain explicit language.
Not fast says there are shitty people in every genre, but there are way more stay off my lawn types in vintage versus know-it-all modern guys. How do we feel about that comment? More stay off my lawn types than know-it-alls. I mean, God, I go to lots of card shows, and I don't feel like I experience much of these attitudes myself, but maybe it's just the way I approach people. John, what do you think?
Well, I just think it's human nature. I mean, didn't your parents complain to you that things weren't the way they are when you were young, or when they were young? They had to walk uphill both ways to school. I think it's just human nature that when you get set in your ways and you've been around the block and you have a lot of experience, that you find a lot of younger stuff dumb. A lot of older people find new music dumb. I just think it's human nature. But I don't think that's the vast majority. I mean, he has a right to feel that way. I have a right to feel like I experience the opposite of that. But all of our opinions are valid, and we all have our own experience depending on where we're looking. So there's certainly some of that going around. There's no doubt about it. But this whole like modern versus vintage argument, or old versus young, is just kind of silly, really.
Yeah. Let's ask Joe. I mean, Joe's been waiting patiently there. Joe, what about you? Go to card shows. You're at the Burbank Card Show all the time, among others. Like, do you notice any? Because you do modern and vintage. Do you ever notice any of these attitudes out there?
Not so much in real time, but I do think it's a trope that is out there, both in the content creating world and online. People maybe are a little more brazen when they're on social media. I tend to just look at it a little bit like it's possible that Brent was, and yeah, I think he misread the comment or the context behind the comment, but his defensiveness was very real. And I think that might have emerged for some ultra modern collectors when the bubble hit, whereas the vintage collectors maybe had a little bit more of a safety net during that time when prices started to kind of come back to earth, or adjust after the boom. And so it makes sense to me kind of from a psychological part. And by the same token, if a get off my lawn sentiment does exist, I would imagine that some vintage people that have been in the game for decades upon decades might have found it a little strange to see, cards tripling, quadrupling overnight, cards that they didn't own because they weren't, buying, 2018 Lucas or, whatever those ones were that were just going, skyrocketing in price. So I can kind of see it on both ways. And I don't necessarily, I agree with John. Like, I think it's a little bit of, we're being a bit hyperbolic in creating this dichotomy, because most of the people I know do some of both. But if we were to, you know, be kind of stereotypical. We could probably find those sentiments antagonistic towards each other, and it's interesting. It tells a story at some level of what's been going on in the hobby over the last, you know, 5 or so years.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap this up because
Plus,
I'm getting
there are
tired.
different facets of the hobby too, right? That not everybody participates in. You
Of
know,
course.
you have the breaking facet, and you know, you have the breakers and that whole thing, and that's kind of totally separate from most of us vintage collectors. And when you go to the national, you know, the breakers are in their own room and they're on the screen, and you know, but it creates a lot of casino-like excitement, and it all adds to the hobby. But there are definitely different facets of the hobby that not everybody feels comfortable in every facet.
All right, I'm going to read out some comments and then we're going to change the topic. Rob Scott says, like in any aspect of life, with time comes wisdom. Chris from Missouri, this is the part of the hobby that is growing old to me. Everybody wants to defend what they are doing and the other guy is wrong. It's just a hobby. Collect what you like. Like that's getting old to me too. Like when I set up at a card show, people come up to my booth. The first thing I like to ask them is, you know, what have you picked up so far? And then if they're conversational, it's like, how do you approach the hobby? What do you do? I want to be exposed to more and more of those approaches because there's an infinite amount of ways and that's one of the coolest things about the hobby is that no two people, I don't think, collect exactly the same, and we can be open-minded and gain experience by learning what other people do and then saying, oh, that might appeal to me. That resonates with me. I might try it, or you know what? I don't want to do that, so I'm not gonna. But I like the idea of hearing what other people do. LGC says, let's put Poirot guy and John into the Thunderdome. Mookie says, confession, I'm smelling cards right now. Bobby Baseball says, you know what I like to do when I hear folks debating the merits of grading? I like to look at my baseball cards. That's fair. Jay Tillman says, it's not grading, it's authenticating and slabbing to protect the card. And to that, all I say is, well, what if you can authenticate yourself and use a different protector? Then do you need the grade?
Yeah, I don't understand. I understand, you know, it protects it, it seals it. I have one right now that's coming apart. It could have easily fallen out. And that's not the first one I've had. The Baseball Hall of Fame for their card museum won't accept slabbed cards because they don't know the long-term effects of them. There's lots of ways to protect them, but I understand when you're encapsulated. But you know, you can put them in a Mag Pro and they're just as protected, in my opinion.
Just as protected, and a lot of us can authenticate on our own. I'll put you know, most likely all four of us on that in that group. Bob Boozle says, give me a PSA 3 and I'll spend the remaining $200 feeding my wife. Dan's Vintage says, John and I have disagreed on this. I feel like grading is the great equalizer. So few fakes get through anymore. The percentage of grading mistakes is pretty low on vintage. Now, is he talking about the wrong grade being awarded or few counterfeits getting through?
He's talking about few fake or counterfeit cards getting through. Yeah,
because that I can agree with. If it's the wrong grade, that I can't agree with, because I think that happens quite a bit still in my, you know, even.
Well, you know, grading for newer people, for a grandmother wanting to buy her grandson a card, you know, it gives you a warm and fuzzy because you don't know what you're buying. So it's you know, it's very useful for, especially for people that are newer.
Yep. Okay, let's keep going here. Not fast as grading is necessary when the majority of transactions are occurring online, and that I completely agree with. And that's, I think, what really allowed grading to flourish in the 90s was the advent of the internet and then eBay and people buying cards sight unseen. So that third-party opinion really gave you something to count on versus the owner of the card saying, well, it's mint or near mint, that kind of thing. Like, John, you've been around that long. Does that make sense to you? Is that how you kind of remember it?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the good dealers, and I used to sell back in the early 2000s on eBay. I was a power seller for a while. You know, I had all these doubles from growing up, and I was like meticulous about explaining every detail of the card to the buyers, and the ones I bought, for the most part, the good dealers would do that. And I have to say that all the cards I bought back then, when I did grade them, graded high. And I didn't have a single one that came back not authentic or anything like that, or even altered. So I had a good experience, back then.
What about you, Leighton, in terms of grading? Like, what is it? What are the? Is it necessary? Is it like? Do you think that the internet is what gave rise to it? Is it as necessary now as it was then?
I think you have the mic muted. There we go.
You're good.
So I do think that it's necessary if you are interested in protecting your investment. So to be very clear, though, I think you're paying for an opinion, but you're also paying for an opinion when you get a Carfax. Like anyone who thinks that when you get a Carfax, it's 100% accurate. Listen, I respectfully disagree. It's always 100% accurate. So I don't always think grading's 100% accurate, but I do think it's nice to have a third party render an opinion on a card that renders either hundreds of dollars at auction for sale, or even thousands of dollars. Would I grade a card for $40, whether it be on the vintage side or trying to get a 10? There was a point in my career I was willing to grade a card that if you could grade a card with PSA for $6 or $8, and the card costs you $1 or $2, you sell it for 40. I think that's great if you could still do that. I don't know if it's still possible. I'm not really involved in that market. But I don't necessarily see grading is as important there, but I think it's very important, to be fair, even in modern cards. Like, I want to know, is my Tom Brady SP Authentic rookie in the eyes of someone else who's not going to be holding it for investment, who's just going to collect this small fee, which I guess is not as small as it used to be, but nonetheless, they're going to tell me maybe I'm a newbie, maybe I'm someone who's worth millions of dollars, but I don't have anyone else to ask other than the person who wants me to spend tens of thousands of dollars with them. And that's what happened in the 80s and 90s. So I think that vintage is important, and I think it's helpful if you want it to be. I could also see how if you are someone who collected in the 70s, you started then, and you're like, oh my God, I don't need you to tell me that my T206 is real. You're not really paying PSA for you to find out if your T206 is real. You're trying to make sure either you want to participate in the set registry, or for that matter, let's be candid, if you have a Hall of Famer that's grading high, you're going to want to get that graded so that if you decide at some point to sell it, you're going to realize more money in your pocket. So they kind of gotcha one way or the other. And to be fair, I have people who approach my company, Just Collect, that are out in the wilderness, right? They don't collect. They just inherited it, or they found it in a shoebox from their mom or their dad, whatever the case is. And yet they insist to me, they will not ship it to me. They will not ship it to a grading company. If I want those cards, I have to come to such and such location. And believe it or not, there's still people like that are out there. And you know what I've learned? I don't try to convince people what to do. I merely present them the options. That way they can decide with all those options which path they'd like to go.
Hey, what was the most expensive baseball card ever sold at auction?
I guess it's the Mantle at this point, maybe the 12.5 million SGC 9.5.
Yeah, so that card was in a screw down for 30 years. And if somebody put it on eBay, because everybody's so paranoid, probably nobody would have bid on it. I find that kind of funny.
Yeah, I mean, I think John, per your point, per your point, John, I think that just really shows the value of the grading. And to be fair, in that particular case, it's very pronounced. But why you might even argue the grading companies aren't getting enough money for the value they're bringing to these cards. But make no mistake, with the recent episode of the Vintage Spotlight, the full-length edition with Matty C, which is a great listen. If you guys get a chance, check it out. Me and Jeremy host it, every few weeks or so. He's taken a route with his collection, and I think it's wonderful. He enjoys still some of the great iconic cards that we all love, but instead of trying to brag to his neighbors or his collecting buddies that I have an 8 or I have a 9 or might even have a 10, he's like, you know what? I have a 2 that looks like a 7. Yeah. I have a 3 that looks like an 8.
That's how I collect
real money for these cards. And so it's just, listen, there's no right or wrong, right? I mean, I don't know. I just think that it's important to embrace the journey. And it's kind of fun, all these different nuanced things, especially as the dollars get bigger. And I do think as the dollars get bigger, grading is even more important. So if it's not important for you for authenticity, okay, then at least you're getting a third party's opinion as to what you think the grade should be. And you don't have to agree, it's just an opinion, but it's a wonderful guide.
Yeah, and they can help themselves along too. They can improve a little bit. I know Breakout Cards did a video where they were slabbing fake Topps authentic Willie Mays signatures, and the emblem was off and everything. These were homemade cards, and they got into slabs. That Wemby card was drastically off centered. It was, everybody knows Kurt's Card Care cleaned it, and still gets a 10. Things like that. If the better they get, the more everybody's just going to be on board and more trustworthy.
Absolutely. But John, I want to further agree with what you're saying, that's the whole point of the grading being an opinion. So you can't just take the opinion of anyone in life that gives you any piece of advice about anything and say, oh my God, well, that opinion is now fact. And so I should walk around and pretend this new opinion I've been rendered by this third party is now fact. The whole point is to educate yourself. And I think that's what's happening. Collectors like yourself and others are saying, you know what? I don't need, Matty C, I don't need to pay the premium you're telling me that a 7, 8, or 9, or 10 is worth. I'm going to get a wonderful example that's going to maybe sell for more than the typical 2, 3, or 4. But this is what is best for me, my financial proposition, and my path in collecting. And I think it's all right. It's just kind of fun to discuss.
Yeah, Matty C, he may be the GOAT with eye appeal. His cards are fabulous looking.
I have some examples I'm going to show you guys too eventually here tonight. I just want to mention one other thing I think is really important when it comes to grading. And Chris from Missouri says there are other benefits from grading, which made me think about things like insurance appraisals, estate planning, like you guys mentioned, that it's going to make it so much easier to sell the cards at the end of the day. Colin Murray, who's a card dealer, he says grading is extremely important if you are running a business. And I think for those, there are really good reasons for grading. And hey, I like my cards graded, my vintage cards especially. I don't like thick cards graded. I like them just in top loaders, but I like my vintage cards graded, nice and uniform and looking nice. But there are really important reasons if any of us gets hit by the proverbial bus, that our estate, our family, our wives, our kids, whomever, can actually go out there and not have to go through the grading process, because it can be very difficult to navigate if you have no idea what it's all about. So
absolutely. In fact, if you were to sell a large collection and half of them weren't graded or most of them weren't graded, your really only option would be to go to a big dealer who knew what they were looking at and would be willing to give you a price, because nowadays it's next to impossible to move cards that aren't in a slab, unless for far you're not going to get the same value for the same condition.
People are skeptical of the mantle. The mantle that was in the screw down frame, right? People are skeptical if it's not one of the things that really grinds me at a card show is if I've got a couple showcases, and one of them I've got some graded vintage, and I might have the odd raw card, not even vintage, never mind modern. It doesn't matter what era it's from. And people will often say if a card in a showcase isn't graded, well, it probably came back a 5 and they broke it out, or it's not gradable. It'd be min size or something like that. But
that's what we're thinking nowadays, because we see it. But that was going back.
Definitely happens sometimes, but not all the time, right? There are some very honest, non-graded cards out there.
That goes back to my point I was making earlier, that there are definitely more bad actors today than ever before, and that's why people will only buy graded cards. If all those bad actors didn't exist, you wouldn't have to worry about all these cards being altered or fake or whatever.
Yeah, well, exactly, right? Let's go to couple more great comments here. Guys, jump in if you want to respond to any of them. That goes for all three of you, even myself. Bob Boozle said, I wish the focus for online buying was more on a card's flaws rather than a grade. I'm not a fan of eBay's listing system. Mid-Atlantic, one simple solution to this issue is to avoid the high-end, high-grade cards and play in the shallower end of the pool where there's not as much incentive to cheat people. And that reminds me of Iowa Dave, because he plays in the shallow end. And I got to say, this is where I am really, this has reinvigorated me in the hobby now, is the hunt for low grade, high eye appeal cards. And I find that recently graded cards by PSA, you have some great opportunities right now. I kind of feel like I'm letting the, well, if you know, you know, and many of you will, but if you haven't thought about this yet, I'll let the cat out of the bag. But like, there are cards that I bought last weekend that are threes that would have, I'm certain, would have been sixes 10, 15 years ago, if not less. And I feel like people are going to catch on to that pretty quick. And we might see the values going up even more than we'd expect for super high eye appeal, like that top 5% kind of thing, low grade. Because I know myself, I used to be under the high grade spell, and I, if it was under a 7, whatever card, if it was too low for me, I wouldn't even look at it. And now I'm like, damn, I missed some great opportunities to get some beautiful cards. But I'm proud to say I've evolved, come around. And years ago, I think I started coming out of that in like 2011, 12, back in those days when I first met, who's a pretty legendary collector, Brady Hill, and a gentleman by the name of Jeff from Card Country. You guys might recognize these guys from the National. They've been setting up there for forever. And then Matty C, also on Instagram, was inspirational when I got to know him a few years ago, just through content. And that's what I find to be so enjoyable now is what Mid-Atlantic is saying.
Many of us have been doing that for years. Everybody else just seems to be catching on. I mean, that's always how I've collected.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I think that right now there's really good opportunity because PSA is I don't know if I should say grading harder or just adhering to the standards better, but there are some super amazing low grade cards I'm seeing in new slabs.
There are. The problem with everybody collecting that way is they're driving the prices of these 3s and 4s, these nice looking cards, up now.
That's what
they're not
saying,
quite
right?
as cheap as they used to be. And
So
you'll
let's
see a
move on.
huge difference, if between a 3 that looks fantastic and a 3 that doesn't.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, in the old days, I think people would just buy almost sight unseen. Like if it was a 3, they knew what they would pay for a 3, and they didn't pay that much attention to the card.
Right.
I think they were too trusting of grading companies.
It was so new. People didn't realize that there is an infinite amount of conditions a card can be in, especially all of them, but especially vintage. We see so many, and it's a pyramid, right? The condition range at a 1 is a lot wider than a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 up to 10. Like you said earlier, John, it's hard to tell the difference between a 9 and a 10 on a modern card nowadays, even often on a card from the 80s, outside of sort of centering, I suppose.
Yeah.
Bink Scott here said nothing wrong with breakers. It's just an option, which I agree with that. It's nothing wrong with it. Like, I'm not a get off my lawn kind of person that way, I don't think. Skeppy says the new generation of collector flipper is completely unaware of what cards were like before the internet, grading, flipping, etc. It wasn't all about what something was worth. We just enjoyed cards, and I'm grateful that I grew up in that era, pre-price guide even. I remember the first Beckett price guide came out, and all of a sudden my cards were worth money, and I really liked it. I'm going to admit, I thought that here I am, a teenager, and all of a sudden these cards I was buying aren't worth 25 cents. Like some are worth 50, 60 bucks at that time. That was pretty cool.
Did you get
Laura,
Baseball Cards magazine by chance? Do you remember that magazine?
Say again?
Did you ever get Baseball Cards magazine? Do you remember that one?
I don't know. I'm thinking in the mid to late 80s when Beckett started coming out, and then the hockey magazine came out eventually.
When that magazine came out, I thought I died and went to heaven. I saw it in a newsstand. I couldn't believe they made a magazine just for baseball cards. I have the first edition hanging on my wall here, the very first one. That magazine was phenomenal.
I love all these kind of hobby adjacent things as well. The old albums that you get with Parkhurst cards, Okichi and back in the 30s and the 50s. Laura here says, as a long-term member of this hobby, I use my knowledge and experience to collect what I like, all with respect. Respect for that comment for sure. Laura, Cardboard and Plastic says, a penny sleeve top loader is safer for a card than most slabs. Many cards shake around in slabs, and I've had a few get damaged. That's something I think a lot of us just kind of kick under the rug and try not to think too much about, because we often like our cards in slabs. But that is something I think Cardboard and Plastic is on to a legitimate concern there. John, your thoughts on that?
Well, I told you I just had a slab crack open, and thank God I caught it. Otherwise, this rare item I have could have slid out and fell on the corner or something. And that's not the first one I've had loosened.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you ship, it can happen
Exactly.
in the mail.
So here's another topic we haven't talked about yet, but it's I think worthy. Key Killer 74 says upcharge is a bigger scam that PSA does. What happens when the player gets hurt and his prices drop? Does PSA refund you back? Now, I've always sort of said, well, I understand it because they have their guarantee. They have to fund it. That's how they fund it. And, Leighton just said sometimes they don't get enough money for the value they bring. And then someone else will say their job is to grade the card. That is, if I need to go to the dentist and the dentist makes my grill look really good and I'm going to go become a multi-platinum record label artist or something like that because of my grill, does the dentist get more money for making me look good, or do they get their fee for? And I know it's a weird analogy. It's all I could come up with right here, but I do understand the upcharge from a guarantee perspective. However, what I don't like is that, just like Key Killer says here, well, what if the card that I pay you $5,000 to grade or whatever the fee is, what if that card goes from being worth $20,000 to being worth $500? And that can happen. Now, like the upcharge assumes you're selling that card right away. Does that mean, is PSA for collectors or is it for sellers? Or, because if you're collecting modern active players and they go down value, you're really screwed based on paying that upcharge. So how do you reconcile that, John?
Well, for me, I totally understand both sides of that argument, and they're both valid. But the way I view it is, if we want to keep grading companies more neutral, then if you're doing it where you're grading it on the value, now they've become a partner. Now they're not just a neutral grading company. Now they have a stake in the game, and that can get dangerous. That's like an auto accident attorney who gets 30% because I lost a limb. Like, now they have a stake in that game, and that just can lead to more corruption, in my opinion. If I'm grading my cards because I want my kids to inherit them 30 years from now, and I got to pay all this money to do so, it's a little different than if I'm walking in there with a Wemby card that's going to sell for $1 million, and they're going to put that slab on it. But should they be a partner in this? And I understand Leighton's point that, well, you're getting that $1 million because they put a 10 on it. But if they're a partner in that, doesn't that lend itself to more corruption? I mean, we saw the PWCC stuff.
Expand on that.
On what?
The PWCC stuff.
Well, it was in all the news.
Okay.
I mean, they were grading. Somebody at PWCC had a grader who was grading trimmed cards. The PWCC is not around any longer, right? Or they were bought.
They were bought. Yeah, they're fanatics.
They were kicked off of eBay, I believe.
That's correct. Yep. And been a lot of turnover there.
When they have too much to gain, and I'm not saying them as a company, but you may have some bad actors within it. I mean, I just think that if grading is to be trusted, it should be neutral. They shouldn't have a stake in what what they grade my card.
Let's get. I hear you, dude. I hear you. It's a tough one to get over. Joe, you got any thoughts on this? Let's hear something, some thoughts from you on this topic, because you're always sending me sort of pictures and be like, I'm going to send this one in because you do grading. You grade vintage cards regularly. So what are your thoughts on all that?
Well, I think what John's raising is an important point, because at least if I'm understanding it, it sounds like PSA may reduce the friction for turning over cards. In other words, you can grade and then immediately put them up for auction, with PSA potentially being the auction house in a way. I could be wrong about that, but that sounds like what's starting to happen. So I think it is something that deserves our close consideration, and we ought to be aware of who's standing to benefit in those moments. That's absolutely fair. In terms of just my own grade, I wanted to tell a quick story, and it may have been actually Baseball Card Collector, the magazine that I saw this in when I was about 13. One of those magazines had listings of vintage cards, which is what I was collecting when I was 13. And, thanks to my paper route there in Berkeley, California, the Berkeley Gazette, I was a faithful delivery. And I wanted a rookie Aaron. So I was scouring this, and there was, maybe 15, 20 Aarons, and, they were just described by the condition, good, fair, VG, X plus. And so I went for the one in my range, which was about $120 if memory serves. I had to go down to the bank and get a cashier's check, right? Which, with my, coins and all denominations from my route money, sent this check off. I think it was somewhere back on the East Coast. And that's a lot of trust, right? And here I was, this 13-year-old kid, but, was in this well-reputed magazine. And it might have taken about 2 months, but it arrived in the mail. And there it was, a 1954 Hank Aaron. And I will say it was a little off center, and it was a little more ding than I had hoped for what was advertised as a VG card. I knew that much at least. The weirdest thing, though, or the coolest thing, I think, was about 2 or 3 weeks later, I got a letter, again, a snail mail letter from the dealer checking in on me and saying, I just wanted to see if that card was acceptable and if you wanted to return it or if you wanted a different version. And in hindsight, I think he may have been aware that it did eventually, I did grade it at one point, and I think it graded a 2.5. So it's just a little under a true VG designation. But he asked if I wanted to swap it out. And as a 13-year-old kid, I had that thing in hand. I didn't want to send it back in the mail. So I just said, I'm good. Thank you. But I think that sort of speaks to maybe a little bit of the counterpoint of what Brent was bringing up, and that maybe it wouldn't be easy for people to understand. There was a sort of generosity of spirit in the collecting world in the old days, and people really did actually have, and I think they still do, but maybe it's less obvious in the midst of bad actors, a lot of integrity and a lot of goodwill to sort of pay it forward in the hobby, with making sure that people were satisfied with their deals, and that everybody, went away from an interaction feeling like they were happy, you were happy, and things were square. So that story just came to mind as we were going through these discussions.
I used to buy in a similar way. I just like to share. In the 90s and early 2000s, I would buy from Kit Young. And he had a woman that worked there. And I would call and he'd advertise a card. And I'd have her describe it to me. And she would describe it to a T, the centering, the corners, and everything. Give me a general range. And I was always happy when I got it. It was exactly what I was expecting. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about, the good dealers. It boils down to who's selling you the cards.
Leighton, jump in. What do you have to say about all this?
Sure. I mean, listen, a lot of different points, but just in terms of the grading, make no mistake, I don't want to give the grading companies more of my money, but I just want to make it clear, like, let's just call it for what it is. We want our cake and we want to eat it too, meaning we want to pay the lowest amount we can for grading, and we want that card to sell for the most amount of money. So forget about anything else, gang. As a small business owner, that's not easy to do if you're the grading company and you want them to have market share, marketing prowess, a great brand name, all this other great stuff, meaning you're actually not just paying for the grading. You're paying for a lot more than that. So I hope to pay as minimal amount as possible in terms of the upcharges. I think SGC might be a little bit kinder on it than PSA, but a lot of folks know that pound for pound, if it's the same card, PSA is generally going to sell for, depends on which issue, but it's going to sell for a little bit more money than the SGC example is. And so it's tough. I am in no run. I'm going to tuck my son in. I do appreciate you having me on the show, Jeremy. Joe, John, thanks so much for chatting. It was a lot of fun connecting with you guys.
Yeah,
Thanks.
great chatting with you. Just to touch on that a little bit, it comes down to what you're doing with that card too. The collectors once again kind of get screwed, because if you have to pay $10,000 to get your 52 Mickey Mantle graded, and you're selling it for 100,000 or 150,000 or whatever, then it might make sense. But if it's in your personal collection and you're a collector and you're not selling it, how can you afford to grade all your cards?
Yeah.
I mean, it's straight money out the door. For me, I don't do it. I'd rather buy other cards. Whoever inherits my collection, they can do it right before they sell. Which, if I ever do sell, I mean, I would grade right before I sell, because you brought it up earlier. You talked about the old slab and how that was too high of a grade by today's standards, and the old slabs don't sell for as much as the new ones. Well, what happens if AI grading takes over, or some other change happens, or they get that reputation again? Now you're spending tens of thousands of dollars to grade all your cards today. 10 years from now, those old slabs might not be worth as much. So to me, it makes most sense to grade right before you sell. Otherwise, you're going to be paying twice to grade them. You're going to get them regraded or something, in new slabs at least.
Yeah, totally with you on that. Just to Joe's comment, Bobby Burrell, who said, Joe, the hobby was and is a small world, and that respect back then went a long way. Hopefully there's still some of that out there these days. All right, more lots of comments, guys, and then I'm going to show you a few just grading discrepancies, I guess you could call them. But first, I did love this key killer comment about, like, if the value drops, do they refund you? No, they don't. And that's
right.
That's my biggest problem with the upcharge. That is my personal biggest problem. Bob Boozle says, "Oh, Cabana Boy, fetch me a copy of Sports Card Collecting and Investing for Dummies. I want to fact check these gentlemen." Bob Boozle always bringing the lines. What's up, Chad Bellamy? Welcome to the show. Hockey Cards Gong Show podcast, whose shirt I'm wearing, says, grading gives new or novice hobbyists peace of mind. The more experience and expertise you gain, the less you need to rely on it. That makes perfect sense, right?
Perfect sense.
And nice shirt, he says. Yes, this is a Gong Show shirt. Vintage oddball. For what I collect, I can care less about the grade. It's important to make sure the card is authentic. Eye appeal is important to me. Here. Dan says, high-end raw cards are often told it shows as if they graded high. That's a bad result of grading. So building in, it's like we see a lot of championships built into players' cards, Luka, etc. Where people are building in a grade on a card that isn't graded, and until it's going to grade an 8. Well, until it grades an 8, I don't know what the opinion is going to tell me on that day. So we're not going to purchase it as if it was an 8, or I'm not going to pay you what it would be as if it was an 8. Not fast as low grade eye appeal is all the rage, as it should be, but stuff isn't a bargain anymore. That's true. It's getting harder and harder, and maybe you need to start buying raw to grade to get cheap low grade cards that have high eye appeal. Chris C says to Skeppy, what PSA does with upcharging is extortion. If you go to a car wash and they do a great job, they don't charge you 50 more because you own a BMW. Grade the card, and if it's a 10, it's a 10. Ziggy says grading an ice dancer and a sports card have the exact same qualified judges. Cardboard and Plastic says PSA grades your card, charges you for a higher grade, and gets a higher commission when they sell your card to a flipper who then sells the card on their platform again for another commission. Yes, it's a very transactional hobby and industry that we're in.
And the government collects taxes each time too.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Good afternoon or good evening, Matthew, 1956 Tops guy. Great to see you here. Colin Murray says, I had a 10-card sub at PSA that was run over by a car truck. 8 slabs were damaged, 2 cards so badly, and it was explained to me that the insurance value was the key on the new value, and he was paid out in a cash settlement. So another, thing, a grading issue, I suppose. But also it seems like having the right value when declared values is important. John.
I just wanted to jump in here because we haven't mentioned it for anybody that doesn't know. The reason that PSA gives for the upcharge is for their insurance protection. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but to be fair, that's why they say they upcharge for because they have
Their
to
guarantee.
protect more money, more value.
Insurance and their guarantee
guaranteed,
as well, right?
Yeah.
Which really, the guarantee, I believe, really only covers their own mistakes. If they misgrade, if there's an issue with authenticity, is the card fake or real, that sort of thing. And then one more, Ziggy here says, I love grading, cracking, regrading. It's all magic and wizard. Sometimes the spell needs more magic. And I know that not everybody, I mean, wizards and that kind of thing. But okay, let's just see what else we have here. I want to show a couple of these card comparisons for grade. I think you guys will enjoy some of that. And okay, I think we're good. I think Bob Boozle says Ziggy and his wizards. I've heard Ziggy talking about that for quite some time. All right, John, you're welcome to stick around. David, signed and slabbed, has entered the studio. So let's bring David on. And but John, stick around unless you have to go. But again, you're well. And I want you to stick around.
I'll jump off. I know you have other guests jumping on.
No, I want you to stick around. You got to stick around for this. You got to stick around for this.
Okay.
I'm not letting you leave yet. Sorry, but I'm not letting. We're going to keep the president on for a little bit longer. But let's just welcome David. There he is. David, welcome to the show, bud. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
We're doing good. Doing good.
Baylor Bears,
Congratulations. All right. So, David, we're talking grading. We're talking eye appeal, all sorts of things. What I want to do now, guys, is I want to show you a couple. These are 3 posts from Maddie C. And I'm going to go, I believe, from oldest to newest. So let's start off with a pretty obvious one. And John, one of the reasons I wanted you to say is I want to get your opinion on, like, where the better value is. It's going to be obvious, but we'll hear from all of us. So, guys, get ready. Let's start with this one here. Maddie C is comparing an SGC 6.5 to a PSA 4.5, and he's basically saying, just saying, and Drez Black Sheep says it better. The 6.5 has a $300,000 estimated auction, and the 4.5 is probably under $100,000, as a regular 4.5. This is no regular 4.5. It's actually even the type 1, I believe, with the solid black line under the logo here. No missing pixel up over here. But let's start with you, John, on this one. Like, you look at this, what do you think? Like, grading isn't the end all be all, or what?
Instantly, without even knowing the grades, I want the one on the right.
Same.
Better centering, better color. Like, look at the blue compared to the more aqua on the left.
Agreed. David, how about you? Which one would you prefer to own?
If I'm keeping it, I probably want the 4.5. If I'm flipping, I want the 6.5.
I like that you take that. I like that answer because there are different approaches. Depends what you're doing. John, any response to that at all? Are you anything going through your mind on that comment?
No, I mean, I was looking at it as which one would I want for my collection. Selling I don't look at things through that eye.
Fair. Joe, how about you?
I just think it's hilarious that we all pulled out our readers. I might be a little bit of the outlier. I just on aesthetics, I like these cards about the same. I actually prefer the aqua as a backdrop, but the centering bothers me a little bit. That that upward, downward, top to bottom centering bothers me. So I kind of look, and so obviously, the bargain is for the ridiculously cheaper one. But that just kind of goes to show, like, aesthetics and eyes can be different. As we're talking about eye appeal can also be, subjective.
Absolutely.
So, that's probably a good thing, because that creates the space for people to find things that appeal to them. And I also know that sometimes it changes. For myself, like, I might like the aqua right now, and I might like it for a couple of years, but maybe a few years after that, I might look at the aqua and say, you know what, I'm not sure I like this aqua. So it's an interesting thing. Fluid.
We've all been there.
I like the one on the right a lot better personally. To me, it's a no-brainer. That's the one I would go for. And I do like the blue better on that one as well. But Bob Boozle says the right looks like my pool, the left looks like my pool after my wife jumps in. Bob Boozle, always good for those comments for sure. All right, let's go to the next one, guys. Here we go. 1976, so a second year, George Brett, PSA 9 versus PSA 7. Again, these are all Maddie C's cards, and Maddie was mine and Leighton's guest on the Vintage Spotlight just earlier this week. And check it out. Please check it out, you guys. I'm just gonna. This is the video right here. This is the Vintage Spotlight. We gained like 50 new subscribers after that video, which has 2,500 views 4 days ago. So check it out if you'd be so kind. Throw us a subscribe. We definitely would appreciate that. Okay, the second year George Brett, a 7 versus a 9. And I don't know why the label's all messy up there, but I look at these two cards. I know which one I like. Let's go. Let's start with David this time. David, you're looking at these two Bretts. Which one would you rather? Now, obviously, your answer is going to be the same on what you'd flip the higher grade one because you know you're going to get more money for it. But if you as a collector, which one do you prefer?
Give me the 9 all day.
John?
I'm having a hard time seeing which one's the 9 on the right or left.
Left.
Yeah, so number one, this is one of those cards that is notoriously off center, hard to find perfectly centered. What I find interesting about these two examples is the one on the right has far more vivid color. It's darker. One on the left almost looks a little faded to me. I'd probably go with the one on the right. I think it's a tad bit better centered and more vibrant color.
I think you're right. That's what I'm seeing as well. Better centered, better color. Back to you, David. Why the 9? What sticks out to you about it?
The first thing I did is went to the pop report. There's only 33. Like, I know how hard that card is. There's also no 10s. Look, one of the things about the 70s cards in general is you do get this massive difference in kind of print and color quality. And so, if you just held these cards standalone, even amongst a group of other 76 tops, I don't know that you'd necessarily notice this sort of color differential. It's only because I have two of them to put next to each other. So, like, when I look at that 9, there's, I can tell it's brighter. Now, because I know there's been some talk in the chat and earlier about this. I mean, I probably don't fully trust PSA all the time to know that something's been messed with. And I've seen enough of these cards to tell you that, like, it wouldn't shock me if that Brett had maybe seen a soak in some bleach.
Yep.
And look, if you're a deep dark hobby purist, like, I can appreciate why you'd want the 7, because at this point I'm not sure what I can do to a card to, like, make the color better. I know how to wash it out a little bit, but I don't know how to make blues bluer. But because I've sort of gotten comfortable with that these things have occurred, and if we're going to put some level of faith in the graders that they've at least done some level of diligence to try to decide. I would still lean the 9 just because historically I know how difficult that card is in that sort of grade.
Yeah, and he makes a great point. When you're going through your cards, if it's not right next to another one, you may not notice. However, I do have cards in my collection that are a little bit faded, and I do notice every time I go through and compare them to other cards in the set. Not the same exact card, but even others in the set. It kind of drives me crazy, and I tend to replace them. So it would be hard. It's hard to tell from the picture which case that would be. And they both look nice.
It is hard, and we're getting comments in the chat. Like Dan here says, scan quality maybe, and this goes for the mantles as well.
Yes.
Scan quality may be an issue here. Colin says the one on the left looks a bit short. He's talking about the Brett here, I believe. Anani talks about could be, fading. Yes. Dave Marone says regrade the 7. If I owned it, I wouldn't. I like it as it is personally. Richie says, I think you have to see it in person. The 7 looks brighter, but the PSA label also looks more red. Maybe the red balance or hue saturation is turned up on the scan. Definitely a possibility. And I think Dan made a similar comment to that. He says the scanning is off again. The red in the PSA slab is lighter. And I mean that those. If these are what are causing these differences, then we're wasting our time talking about them, truly. Yeah. But I do believe that in this case, the 7 would be Matty C's card, and the 9 he took off from an auction house. That's what I think the situation is here. His comment, by the way, is rare, just like one of you guys said, how rare this. I think you said, John. He says rare, dead on centering, and an undergraded 7 for $100 versus poor centering and tilt. With 9 corners, cost is $11,000 and counting at auction. Can any human eyes look at these two and see the 9 as $10,900 better? I'd pay a large premium over average for the 7 before I drop the penny on the 9. Those who know the 76 Brett know how great centering on it is much, much rarer than on than a few mint corners. So he's saying it,
absolutely. That card I think I have 3 of them, because if I find one that's nicely centered, I'd buy it.
Yeah.
It's so hard to find centered.
And you have that experience, a rare card for centering. And the last one, and this one Matt just posted today, because he just picked up, I'm going to put him up. He just picked up the card on the right, guys. 1957 Topps, Ted Williams, a PSA 6 on the right in a brand new grading slab versus a PSA 9 on the left, which is a very old serial number that was re-slabbed into the new PSA slab. And the Reds look a bit different for sure. The one on the left is toned down a little bit, but that's not his card. So you'd think the auction house might have, maybe they maybe they didn't, but you'd expect them to maybe make it look a bit nicer, I suppose. In any event, based on what we see here, I mean, for me, the one on the right is a far superior card, even though it's 3 grades lower than the one on the left, based on what I can see here in 2 dimensions. Obviously, and I'm not seeing the backs as well, which in this case, I don't think there's anything wrong with the back of actually, he showed me the back of the 6. There's nothing wrong with the back of the 6 in terms of like any major staining or corner folds or anything like that. So, oh, wait, Joe, did we get your opinion on the Bretts?
Yeah, I lean towards the right just because the saturation is, as you know, I appreciate that. So nothing too much to add. Thanks.
Okay, I just want to make sure I didn't leave you out of that one. And then the 57 Topps, Ted Williams. I mean, in this one, let's go to you again, David. If what we're seeing is what they are, and these, I love the 57 Topps. I just picked up 4 of them last Saturday in low grade, and I'm loving them. David, your thoughts on these two compared to each other?
There's 15 9s. There's 900 6s. Give me the 9 all day. I'm like, you're asking me to trade 40 cards for 1. No, thank you. Not on this.
So you would rather give up the 40 cards to have the 9?
Yes, I'm not gonna it cost me. I could buy 40 of those 6s for the 1 9. I give me the 9 all day, because the pop difference is like whatever that math works out to. It's like 6,000. I mean, no. So
grade scarcity is very important to you, is what you're saying.
On a card like this one, yes, it's very important, because these 57s are like, they're the worst, right? They're never centered. And again, I get the idea, and I would probably agree, just from what I can see here. Do I think that 9 may have seen the edge of a knife? Probably. I mean, every border looks short to me. But again, like we can play that game all we want with the grading company. And listen, if you don't like it, then go start your own grading company. And I think we'd all agree the last thing we need in the hobby is another grading company. So, I mean, the market's sort of spoken on this stuff. Now, I don't collect high grade like this because I don't have an unlimited budget. And so to me, I think I could get a PSA 4 of this card that's not that different from the 6 for under $500. So, like, to me, that's a better choice, if that makes sense.
I hear what you're saying. And listen, it just different approaches. For me, I would way rather have the 6 and 39 other cards or all that money left over, because the grade scarcity means very little to me, especially with this was such a low serial number on the Ted Williams, the 020. You know that it's definitely overgraded, higher likelihood that it was trimmed and then slabbed. So, but I care more about the card than the grade around it, and I care more about the card than the population, the scarcity of the high grade. But I'm not judging you for the way you're doing. It's just not the way that I would do it.
Let me ask you a question too, though, because let's deal with what I think could be a hobby myth. So I agree with you. This is an old slab number, which means it was re-slabbed, but it's in the lighthouse holder. So I hear people talking all the time that if you go to re-slab an older one, that they're going to review it. And if they don't agree with the grade, they'll mark it down, re-slab it, marked down. And then you've got whatever issue you have on the guarantee side. I mean, do you guys, I think that those stories are mostly false. But do you guys know out of experience or people who have done it that it really happens? And because the reason it's important here, Jeremy, is like if it's in the new slab and it really was reviewed, they kept their 9 on it.
Yeah, that's a great. I do not know the policy there. John, do you have?
I've never heard of them lowering the grade or regrading it.
I haven't either. I love it. If that's the case, I love it. Because then no one would do it because there's too much risk. I think people are doing it though.
That's right.
It's a reholder.
We all know we have certain cards that are overgraded, and you would never send it in for a new holder if it was under that kind of scrutiny every time.
Exactly. And I'm falling out of love with some of those cards because it's like, they might have been purchased a long time ago, and I know they're overgraded in my mind, and that bothers me. I'd rather just put them in the right grade slab. But if I'm going to sell them, I'm better off selling them as is and letting the auction company bear the responsibility of the misgrade, if you will. But I always thought a reholder was just a reholder. Like they'll do it for $5 or $10 is what my understanding was. But that's also, I haven't looked at it in a few years probably.
Well, they should reserve the right to change the grade, because I'll tell you, any of us that collect Kellogg's, any of you out there that collect Kellogg's cards, I've seen PSA 10s where they're cracked, which means that they cracked in after they were slabbed. They were flattened too quickly. Or you can have somebody that displays their cards in the sun and it fades. Yep. And you have a 9 that's all faded, and when it goes in, it should get a new grade. Because the person selling that's probably not revealing that that's faded.
Well, here we go, guys. The chat is coming through for us. We're not getting consensus, but Cardboard and Plastic says they don't review, they just give it the same grade. Colin Murray, who does a lot of grading, says they will not downgrade on a reslab 100%, he says. But then T-Mess says reholders have to go through grading. I don't know. Bing says will never happen. Cardboard and Plastic, if they reviewed each card, they would become bankrupt because, they do a lot of reholders. That would kill their business. Terp says never. They just reholder. Vintage says, I believe PSA only regrades when reslabbing if the card has visible damage, like water damage. It has happened, but almost never the case. T-Mess says all reholders are graded and get secure scans. Bink says, my Kellogg's have never cracked. Vintage says, or if the plastic is cracked and might have damaged the card. Dan says, I know for certain that SGC does not regrade on a reholder submission. And Colin Murray says, it's on their website. They do not regrade on a reholder. So we're having a lot of differing opinions here. And check the PSA website, guys, on the reholder. I mean, I can bring it up right now.
I will tell you this. If you have a PSA 10 Kellogg's card that has a crack down the middle, and they just re-slab it, a 10, that would be a scam. Knowingly re-slab a 10 with a crack down the middle.
Yeah, I think that would present a problem, and I have a couple of those, John. So I'm sensitive to it.
Yeah, I've seen them for sale, over the years.
This submission type, the cards will not be graded. The cards will be received and then inspected by a member to determine if the card and holder are authentic. Once it is determined that the holder and card are genuine, the card will be removed and placed into a new PSA holder. The service is generally used for cards that are housed in PSA holders that have been damaged or to create label consistency within a collection. But it says right here, for this submission type being reholder, the cards will not be graded. I mean,
so I can tell
right?
you from being at shows, people talk about all the time on non-lighthouse holders that you risk losing a grade.
I've heard that too. I've heard that too.
Which is why, it's why I wanted to bring it up, Jeremy, because one of the things I think that people coming on here can do is start to dispel some of the BS myths that are out there, like that one.
And David, if you don't mind me jumping in here, I mean, I wonder too, just in the recent news with, deactivation of certain certs, like that's not a reholder situation, but clearly if information comes to them that gives them the sense that a card has been altered, they, I think, do reserve the right to make an executive decision. I don't see why they wouldn't do that with a card in hand.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But, the letter of the law and what they do, who knows?
And listen, this is a big issue in modern cards. Like I think about, with some of the where I've seen it happen is like some of the Topps paper colors. So like red, blue, black, gold, like those cards, especially from the 2010s, they chip. And so sometimes when they're in the holder, you can actually see that an edge is chipped off, or like the color of it, right? I've not bought certain Mookie Betts and Jose Altuve's because I can see in the holder it's not a 10.
Yeah, some autographs fade too. Some of those card issues had real bad autograph issues where the auto would fade. Would that get the same grade?
Well, and listen, there's a double issue on the autographs because they actually do reserve the right on a slabbed autograph to change their mind later and say it's not authentic. I've seen that actually happen with people who subbed the old blue flip authentic with no card grade. They resub it for the dual grade card and auto, and PSA's like, no, we don't believe this auto is good anymore. Sorry.
Wow. Well, I mean, it makes sense though, because you learn about things as time goes on. We didn't know back in the day that Bo Jackson's wife was signing his stuff. That was learned later. And I know the clubhouse guy that signed for Roberto Clemente. I have seen that autograph authenticated by the grading companies. And now we, know more. So, they learn as time goes on, I guess. Makes sense.
Yeah. Well, Woe PG's cardboard says, my beef is graded cards fading. He doesn't say not fasting, graded cards fading. And there's something to that too. Autograph grade. How many faded autographs have you seen that are graded at 10? Makes absolutely no sense. I think grading autographs doesn't make much sense because of that. but cards don't tend to fade quite as much unless they're sitting out in the sun for extended periods. And that's one of the biggest issues with an LCS having singles on display, autoed.
Well, yeah. Some people, if you put it in your house and there's light that comes in a window, that's just like sitting out in the sun. That can happen.
Yeah, for sure. Here, Colin says, if you see the wrong grade on a card, send it in for a new grade. And if the grade goes down, they will pay you out the difference. He's referring to their guarantee there, which is why one of the reasons why they upcharge or charge based on value. Tiger Jordan says, I've submitted a PSA 10 slab that had minor crack on the case for Reholder, and PSA regraded it to a 4. They identified surface damage on the card that likely occurred from when the slab incurred the crack. So that's part of their pre-screening before they open it up that they said about on the website, right? They will look at the card and make sure it's authentic and genuine, and I guess also make sure that the new grade is at least somewhat consistent with their standards. I mean, they can't just go blindly right into it, I don't think. Triple V asks, when will the hobby demand adequate UV protection for these acrylic plastic holders? I never fan out over any slab. I just want the card within it. I think that's important for sure there myself. I mean, it's an important topic to raise, definitely. And Vintage here said it has to be a major issue to lower the grade, but it has happened. So we know about that. Colin says for them to have it on the website, they have to honor it or it would not be there. And Bink says, now I do have a couple of cracked slabs, should probably regrade those. Totally up to you how you want to proceed with that. So, okay, guys, anything else on that topic? Joe, John, David, anything else? And then we can move on. We're good?
I'm good.
Okay. John, if you want to take off, feel free. I wanted you to stick around for the card comparisons, and we'll hear what David has on his mind. But you're welcome to stick around, man. Seriously, we'll have someone else joining us in about 15 minutes, I think. So you're welcome to stay as long as you want.
I appreciate it. I'm going to step aside and let some other people talk. I just want to thank you for having me on. You do a great job, and it's my pleasure and honor to be on.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. Let's give John a round of applause.
See you guys. It was great talking with you.
See you, John. Thank you. All right, David. So, buddy, you went to the Baylor game, successful. You're in a good mood. Everything worked out for you guys. What is on your mind hobby-wise right now? You walked into a flurry of discussion there. What's on your mind right now in the hobby? What's been, your story posts on Instagram are all often somewhat, they can be a little bit controversial, a little bit feisty, if you will, a little salty sometimes. What's been making you passionate in the hobby lately?
So one of the things that this has bothered me for a long time, and now that we're in Black Friday, Cyber Monday sales, it's bothering me even more. We have this great thing called the internet, and it gives you access to literally years worth of information. And in the hobby, there's pricing information that's available that goes back damn near forever. But somehow, no matter what card it is I'm selling, the only price that seems to matter is the lowest one that anyone can find from the last 6 months. And that is the market. And that's a fair offer. So I'm wondering what you guys, I have my own thoughts of why that sort of happens. And, Jeremy, I connected a lot back to my 2 hobby rules, which we could talk about in a minute. But I'm interested to hear from you guys. Why do you think people get so caught up with that single number when, for lots of different cards, there could have been 10 of them last week?
Yeah, listen, you set up at a card show one time, and all of a sudden this becomes something that you start to think about, right? And I just came off of a run of, I don't know, 6 or 7 card shows in a row. Nice to take a little break for a few months, but I don't mind people checking comps at my table, and I check comps at other tables. I'm looking for all the data I can find on a card so I can arrive at what I think is a fair price. But, comps are not perfect. They just aren't. And they're an incomplete data set as well. And they're so limited many are so limited in their relevance. You really have to drill down on some of them. eBay, what time did it end? Did it end during a football game? Did it end at a time when people were at a card show? Other things, of course. What was the listing quality like? If it's a graded vintage card, was it strong for the grade, average, or low? There's all these things that come into play. However, all that said, when you're buying, when the flipper community and they're at card shows, when they're buying cards, all they want to do is buy low to sell high. So they're going to do everything in their power to get the best price from you. And it's up to you how you treat them in response. Do you tell them to F off and go away? Or do you try and tell them, I'm not somebody who sells really well to flippers because I'm not going to give the same credence to the comps that you're looking at on your phone. And so that, kind of my thought as a buyer, I mean, listen, if a seller is going by the most recent comp, that can work to my advantage. And I won't argue much because I think that comp wasn't a good one. And so great. But if they're looking at or if I think that the card's, it's just really nice for the grade. But as a seller, I don't mind when people do it, but I'm not saying that it doesn't frustrate me at all. It's just I understand it's going to happen. If you don't understand that and you're setting up at a card show, you may as well save yourself the anxiety and just not set up at a card show because you're going to be dealing with that all day long, right? So
all day,
accept it, and then just figure out how are you going to respond to these people. Have a strategy. Stay friendly. I mean, they're just working their angles, but you don't have any obligation to sell it to somebody unless they're willing to pay your sticker price. So those are my immediate thoughts that come to mind. Let's get Joe's thoughts, and then David, you can debrief us on all that.
Yeah, you did a great job breaking down context and market conditions and how basically no two moments are the same in any context of life on all sorts of factors. So why would the purchase of a card, whether it's, on eBay or some other platform, why would that be any different? I had one of those proverbial old man get off my lawn moments recently when we were using that term earlier, David. And it's as you, Jeremy, you know me, I'm a pretty easygoing guy, but I kind of lost it a little bit with this one potential buyer on eBay, because I don't mind if somebody does it once, right? There's these 3, it was a 58 mantle that I had graded raw. It was a 1.5. It was centered. It had good registration and color, but it was a 1.5. So he quoted me, the 3 comps. He left out 2 other comps, which I found interesting. But even that, I can roll with that, and I can say, nice try, but no, I'm sticking with my price here. But it's when they come back multiple times and feel like they're teaching you something that's when I kind of lost it. And so I wrote a fairly lengthy and hope, it occurs to me I should probably go back and cut and paste that so I have it handy for the next one, the next time it happens, because as soon as I pressed send, I thought to myself, why did I waste so much time? Vitriol and this, but because it triggered me. And so, yeah, I feel you, David, on that phenomenon. And I think it's just one of those things where, yeah, whether they're flippers or not, Jay Lee, I don't know if they're flippers. Maybe they just want it in their collection. They're trying to get the absolute best bargain they can. This was a vintage card. But there may be a certain amount of either naivete or do you really think I'm that dumb to not notice that the comps that you're referencing weren't as well centered as this, didn't have as much clarity. I mean, there's just so much to factor in. So yeah, I had an old man get off my lawn moment.
And we all have access to the same comps for the most part. So yeah, David, anything, some really good comments I want to get to, but anything responding to Joe and myself?
Look, I'm just glad I'm not the only one that experiences this, because like I started a Black Friday sale on my eBay store. I mean, I put literally every card is at least 8 to 10% off or more, right? And I can't sell a single card, but somehow, and Jeremy was talking earlier about some of my posts on Instagram. You know, I'm the hobby's periodic reminder to send offers, not messages, please. Like that's just my preference. Like, if you want to send me a crappy offer, just go ahead and send it, because usually I have an auto decline so that I don't even have to talk to you. But no, I get sent the messages. So anyway, I'm glad I'm not the only one that gets to suffer through that. And I would tell people too, don't even come to my lawn unless you have a lawnmower. Okay. I don't mow my own yard. I let other people take care of that. But so I'm not going to shout you off, but you better have a lawnmower if you come over. So,
yeah, I mean, if I have a price on my card, I don't want, and someone asks me what's the best I can do on it, I kind of am going to say, well, I don't want to negotiate against myself. So what's the highest, what's the most you'll pay for it? But oh, that said, when I'm at someone else's booth and they have a price, I might say, what's the lowest you'll take for it? Because they might tell me. Like that's poker at that point. So while my response is going to be one thing, I kind of do the same thing. I'm guilty of doing the same thing to other people, unless there's someone like you, David, who's just going to say, well, for, you know, or like me, who just says, no, you're next. I started the negotiation by putting a price tag on my card and on the front of my card, not on the back of it. Let's do some comments, and then we're going to bring Danny Black on. Danny Black's going to join us in a couple of moments here. Turpin says, I don't like that either. I believe it should be the average of the 3 most recent comps. Well, to me, that depends on when they were. Maybe the most recent comp is a good indicator. They can be good, but they're not always. You know, not all comps are equal for sure. Chris C says comps are flawed, and to always use the lowest is really unfair. Use an average of multiple sales. Okay, similar. Bobby says generally the true price of the item is the 3rd highest bidder in an open auction on a card not listed so often. And I love that 3rd highest, because you know, you've got, if you think about how bidding works in bidding wars, 2 people can go at it. Once the top guy is out, he's got his copy. Now the value is really how high is the number 3 guy going to push number 2 guy next time, and so on and so forth. So it's an interesting way to analyze these things. Jeff's card journey says, tell him to F off and go away. Skeppy says, $10 says Jeremy never told anyone to F off on a price disagreement. No, but I will tell you a story, but I'll wait for Danny to come on to tell you this story.
I'm not sure I'd take that bet. I'm not sure.
Colin Murray says, when guys are looking at comps at my booth, I always tell them to look at the centering or image and should pay a bit of premium because you have it in hand and can view it at all angles. I think that's completely fair. Like that makes so much sense to me. I think that's a professional approach as well. Terp says, I love buying poorly listed cards on eBay. And just to see what comments have recently come in on this. Terp says, I just asked the seller, are they firm? That's a good question to ask somebody too. Are you firm? And then you have the option to say yes or no. And if Terp asks me if I'm firm and I say no, then it's up to him to make the next offer. I think that's totally fair in a negotiation. Decoy says, whenever I have issues selling cards, I just list as a lot. Lot buyers will buy anything. You won't get what it's worth, but you know someone wanted it, which I find comfort in. That's nice. Bob Boozle says, I love losing money to make people feel better. And Josh Giddy says, I truly believe the true comp is the auction price 24 hours before the auction ends. That I don't understand. I think I understand kind of where you're at, is that a lot of bids come in the final minute of the auction. So I'd actually say to this comment here from Josh Giddy Super Collectors, like, well, why not say a minute before it ends? Because that's when a lot of the bids come in, is within the last minute or even the last 5 seconds in many cases, sometimes in the last 2 seconds. So I'm not sure I agree with that, Josh Giddy Super Collector, but I would need to understand more about why you say that. Okay, let's bring on Danny Black, you guys. Danny Black let's just bring him on. He'll tell you what he is. Danny, you ready to go? Danny Black, everybody. Please give Danny Black a quick little round of applause. Danny, what's going on, bud?
What's going on, buddy? How you doing? Hey, guys, how's it going?
We're doing good. Please meet Joe. Please meet David. If you haven't yet, guys, Danny, tell us what Hobby News Daily, as well as collectibles on Sports Illustrated. Give a real quick, because I shout out your Hobby News Daily every episode. Tell us a little bit about what your roles are with Hobby News Daily and collectibles on SI.
Real quick, I founded Hobby News Daily a couple years ago. Long form writing, typically, it is a passion project. It's generally positive. We're not looking to destroy big stories in the hobby, and a lot of great writers. And you'll see new stuff every day. SI collectibles and SI is backed by the SI engine, and that's just bam. I mean, we're putting out 5-10 articles a day typically, and that's a lot quicker, a lot more timely, a lot more what's going on currently. And so that's a whole different challenge, but I'm having a blast doing both.
Right on. Well, here is collectibles on SI, and I thought I had a Hobby News. I'll bring up Hobby News Daily shortly. I thought I had a window open for it, but I'll grab one. We'll just take a look at that and show people what it is. Because as Mookie Chilson says, Danny Black is a mensch off the bench, and I mean, you are a good guy. Always like hanging and grateful for our friendship. We met for the first time in person, I believe, at the Beckett Industry Summit a few years ago, and now we're basically godfathers of each other's kids by now, right? I kid.
I believe you have legal right to my house, actually.
All right, I'll take it. I'll take it for sure. All right.
Can I say what's up to Mookie and the mention on the bench? Is definitely Mookie.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, back that last conversation though. A couple more comments that I just want to address really quick, guys. First of all, yeah, Colin Murray says a show really is a buy it now and not an auction. I think that's a real astute way of thinking about it, right? You're at a show, it's buy it now or buy it now best offer. It's really buy it now or best offer, right? Yeah. I think at first, David, you're like, but now that makes more sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Show
says
is all about negotiating.
All about it. So much fun. And Bobby says auctions don't start until the last 10 seconds. So yeah, that certainly resonates with me. That's how the hobby seems to be, in my mind at least. Well, Bobby Burrell, Spicoli, I know that dude. Yeah, Bobby is a writer for Hobby News Daily. Is he writing for collectibles on SI as well?
No, Bobby does great long form pieces. As long as with his stuff, he'll need them. So follow him there, but you'll see him on Hobby News Daily.
Right on. Okay. So David, stick around. I want you part of this still, but I want to hear from Danny, because one of the questions that I said to him, I said, listen, you're running two of these big news organizations in the hobby now, Hobby News Daily, collectibles on SI. You're seeing the metrics, you're seeing the analytics on like what are people interested in out there. And in this community here, the four of us, pretty much everybody in the chat, listening, watching, I feel like we all are maybe like, we don't necessarily go to collectibles on SI. It's new, but I think that website, that news source is really going to be capturing the more casual collector, the general public who's the sports fan, who's not maybe into collecting, especially sports cards. And maybe you have some insight now on what that general public is interested in. Do you have that insight? Is there anything that you can share with us that we might not expect, or what type of topics are really resonating with the public? And I know it's a lot of back-to-back, it's one big long question here, or several, but the other thing is like, how many people are visiting these websites? Like, is it more than we'd expect? So I'll let you riff off of that.
All right, I'll take them in alphabetical order. No, First of all, I found out that I'm an old man very quickly when I found out what was trending at SI. I would personally collect vintage. I am a vintage collector. I like a slower pace in the hobby. I don't need to have my phone go off every 5 minutes with breaking news. That being said, what is popular and very, very popular right now are these MLB debut patches. They are so cool, and even for an old guy like me, they are popular. We can't write enough articles about them. People can't get enough information on them. They've been a hit every time we've put out an article. So the MLB debut patches are extremely popular.
You know, I just want to say, like, that's one of the innovations that Fanatics brought. And, you know, they get a lot of slack from the hobby, Fanatics does, but you're telling us kind of the proof is in the pudding. That is one innovation that may be working out there to 10x the hobby, as we love to say, because Michael Rubin is probably his most famous quote since he came into the game. Is that proof in the pudding, would you say?
There is no doubt that these debut patches, we will look back at them as a turning point in cards. And somebody's mentioned it in the comments. We had an article about this. The fact that the players are seeking out the patches themselves, the fact that they see the patch, they autograph the card, and then they don't get to keep it. I mean, imagine what that must feel like. You work your whole life to make it to the majors, and you watch your debut patch, go out the door. So that's been a really cool phenomenon. When the players want it, then the fans definitely want it.
Talk about a bounty, right? Like, these are the ultimate bounties, in terms of you could probably get whatever you want from these players in terms of an experience. Now, you'll get some cash too, but you'll probably get an experience out of it as well. So, David, you're a baseball guy, like, through and through. What do you think about these debut patches?
So, I'm not gonna say I don't think they're cool, because I do think. Well, I mean, look, Jeremy, they took a sticker and they stuck it on a jersey, and then after the game they peeled it off, and like idiots, the hobby decided that that's worth $250,000 when I could buy the entire rest of the jersey that thing was on for less than a tenth of that. And again, I collect everything. I don't just collect cards. I collect cards, autographs, vintage, modern, ultra modern, entertainment, presidents, game used, all of it. If it can be collected and has anything to do with anything, I'm probably interested. To me, I agree with Danny that like that it's a big move forward in terms of like authenticity and the history of an item. But I think that card collectors have really overdone it in terms of what those things are worth. Like, if you give me the choice of Paul Skeen's debut patch card or the debut jersey, that the rest of the jersey, give me the jersey, because it won't cost me nearly as much, and I can make 500 patch cards with it.
So you think they're over?
I think it's like drastically overdone from a hobby point of view, but I think Fanatics introducing it helps set the bar moving forward of kind of how all of the game used material and things really should be approached.
Okay. I love the contrarian kind of approach to it. Danny, do you respond to that at all? Like, because I mean, you told us how the public is responding based on what you see on SI. And by the way, this is hobbynewsdaily.com right here, everybody. Hobbynewsdaily.com. Be sure to check it out. Danny puts in. Danny and his team of and I just want to show you guys this. We click on all writers here, and you're going to see there is like 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24 writers in there, and you'll recognize some of them. You know, Rich Klein's a legend. He's in there. You got Mike Moynihan, Drew Herndon, old time content creators, Mike Summer as well. Just a ton. Courtney, like Brody the Kid, Eric Norton, everybody's. It's really cool. A cool group of writers, Danny. But back to the question at hand. How do you respond to David's comments and that position?
There is no doubt that Paul Skeens' card is overpriced, without a doubt. But I will say, on a checklist of 200 and some cards, it can be very cool on 249. And the hobby is going to go hobby stupid like they always do on 1% of everything. So, that I can absolutely accept as fact. But that being said, how cool is it if you pull the card that you have bounties out there? Forget the patch. If you're a Pittsburgh fan, they're offering 30 years of season tickets. Now that's just stuff growing up. I can't imagine ever even having that possibility with my baseball cards. I was hoping for a rated rookie or a Diamond King or, something like that. I can't imagine that these would be inserted. So that's my response. People seem to be interested in it, and I see the value. The Paul Skeens one, you could buy Paul Skeens for that much money.
Joe, what about you? What do you think about these things?
Well, I probably share David's sensibilities from a collecting standpoint, at least personally. But the story I want to tell is I went to a friend was visiting from out of town, and this was
story time.
The day before Thanksgiving. Oh, that was scary. And so we were around the fire pit up there in the Santa Cruz mountains, enjoying ourselves. And guy found out that I knew a little bit about cards, and he's like, "Oh, did you hear about the bounty? And did you, and all of a sudden the whole circle was talking about, this lifetime or 30-year, Pirates seats, and then they were talking about Livy Dunn, and they were talking about this. These were people that have this one guy, the husband-in-law or whatever of my friend, brother-in-law, had a collecting interest and had heard about this. And I guess it's just anecdotal to the idea that if this generates positive buzz, and not to get into the positivity thing, but I don't think there's anything wrong with outsiders finding a fascination and potentially an entry point to the hobby. So I like it for that. And I find it kind of amusing to see people that have no real facility with the workings of the card world suddenly getting, it's like tulips or something. It's like, okay, here we are. So I kind of like it, even though it's not something that aesthetically appeals to me, and it feels a little bit like a not quite manufactured scarcity, but a manufactured ingenuity, if you will, in terms of the game used first thing. But if you're on the outside and that's cool and that attracts you, like, well, hey, welcome to our world. And like, there's a lot of other cool stuff. Look around. You might find some other stuff that you're pretty interested in.
Yeah. Let's do some Danny, unless you have an auto response, please go ahead, and then I'll go to some comments.
No, I'll go to some comments because I agree with a lot of the comments.
All right. So Bobby first says, David, say it's trite and be done with it. Nick Leach says, I doubt Paul Skeens' debut jersey is available. Bob Boozle says, I want to see David's reaction to pulling a debut patch out of a pack. Of course, he's going to love it because he knows.
Yeah, and I'm going to sell that sucker so fast.
Right.
Or no, I'm going to trade it. I would trade it. Trade it. Yeah.
LGC says rookie equals total season, but debut equals first appearance ever. It's very meaningful, in my opinion. Fair. That's a fair comment, though. Nick Leach says, I'm with David, though, on collecting things. If it has any significance, I'm probably collecting it. Should probably be on a shirt. Bobby says, would have been nice if they issued one patch per inning or 9 of each. And Vintage Card Collector says Fanatics will 100% copy the NMLB debut patch when they take over NFL and NBA. Of course they will. No doubt about that, Vintage. One thing about Bobby's comment here is, like, we're kind of, David is shaking his head about, it being meaningful about the first appearance ever. Now that's for a whole game, assuming they played the whole game, where if they do one inning each, now it's only 1 inning's worth of game use play. So that, it would be nice. There's 9 hits now, but it kind of loses significance, I think, at that point.
Can I give you the example from the cards? Because I think there's actually a real example in the cards. Jason Dominguez had his MLB debut in Houston, hit a home run in his first at bat. Okay? Last year, not in 2024, in 2023. But he didn't play enough games to be truly classified yet as a rookie. He's going to be a rookie like in 2025. So, like, is that significant? I think it's not, or not yet, because until he actually becomes a regular major league player, he really hasn't done anything other than hit a home run. Like, we're ascribing so much significance to something that has this much history on it at the moment. Does that make sense? But like,
you just killed the entire Bowman first business.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think that card, I'm sure if the Dominguez came to auction, I mean, it's going to get, don't you think it would get 6 figures? I think it probably does.
Probably.
I mean, they're really rich Yankee guys out there that would want to have it.
Probably. But isn't that what prospecting is in the hobby? Isn't
100%. 100%.
Yeah. Danny, so you mentioned the debut patch. Any other topics that the general public is finding really interesting about our hobby right now? Let's see what else you got.
Well, along with that, anything tied to Paul Skeens and Livy Dunn, I have no idea why there's any interest there. But evidently Livy Dunn gets some clicks and Paul Skeens along with her. The coolest thing, though, and I got to tell you, this really warmed my heart, is articles on cards from the 80s. Yeah, anything from what to do with them to are they worth anything? How do I figure out how to handle the collection? All those articles have been really popular, which makes me feel like some guys my age are reading as well. And I think we all love stories on the Bill Ripken Fun Face card. I mean, who doesn't like that?
And that kind of, to me, lends to how during the pandemic, many of those people came back into the hobby. They rediscovered those cards. And that was like, if you were in the hobby in that when Upper Deck came in and Score and Pro Set entered the space, if you were in the hobby at that time, you remember that everybody was collecting. Like everybody, it didn't matter who you were, right? Everyone was collecting back then. So it's interesting, Danny, to me that is something that is gaining a lot of traction on the. It's not interesting. I should say it's not surprising that gains a lot of traction on the site. And I wonder, and maybe you can answer this, Danny. Maybe you can. I don't know, but is Collect on SI and Sports Illustrated, are they is it big enough to make a difference in our hobby, do you think, in terms of new people coming in?
Well, you hit the nail on the head before when you said our audience is definitely a broader sports audience than it is the niche hobby audience. And the hobby itself has got a lot of people covering it. I think this is definitely big enough to bring people in. And we're seeing, when people come in for the Paul Skeens, Livy Dunn story, they're staying because now they're learning more about the hobby. They're learning more about the cards. They're getting more educated. And we're finding that the retention and people coming back is pretty solid.
That's cool. That's cool to know. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, so many of us do just have so much nostalgia attached to those times, and the junk wax era, as we're definitely. Go ahead, Colin.
Best argument ever. Has the Bill Ripken card gotten more or less popular over the years?
I don't know. I mean,
More.
Has it?
Yes.
Isn't that unbelievable? We are all children. The simple fact that there's a cuss word on the card, we are all children and love that card.
And we will pay him $75 to $100 per item just to sign his name on them.
It's interesting
Forever.
though, because like now there's so many other things to collect now. There's been, what year is that card from? 87, is it? Or 80, 88, 89? So, you've got 35 years since then of things to collect, and that card is still popular. Maybe it's because, has it become more popular since the pandemic, since people came back into the hobby? Is that like both to you and to Danny and David, because you're both seem to really feel that way. Well, Joe, you did too. You were doing this as well. I personally haven't seen it more, because back then you go to one of the high school gymnasium card shows in 1990, 91, 92, 93, and that card, along with Lee Frank Thomas and Ken Griffey Jr., were all the rage. That was it, right? Like even John Olerud was getting love back then. Marquise Grissom, Delino DeShield, like that's what I think. That's who I'm remembering back then. The Billy Ripken was also in that echelon of popularity. Now, I think people want a copy of it for the heck of it, but I don't think that it's like there's no rush to get one. I don't think, is there? Like, Danny?
They hold their price decently, which makes me believe that there's some consistent volume going, which I told you just blows my mind. I love it. It's like the goldenrod from that card. People just can't turn away. And I don't know what that says about our hobby, but this is who we are as a people.
It's interesting for me because I've owned both the goldenrod and the Billy Ripken F-Face card, and I've sold them both because I kind of got past the whole just that whole thing about them, that they're unique and odd and just kind of they stick out on their own. Right? I'm kind of they're not important enough for my. Let me rephrase. I don't need them in my collection. To me, they're not important enough for and I know they're important for so many people, but I don't love many. Anyway, that's off topic. The point of the matter here was that 80s, 90s, the junk wax era is still a very hot era as far as people who are casually rediscovering the hobby, even just today. Danny, is that something you've learned on SI?
100% true, and that again I think reflects the general sports fan versus the hobby niche.
Yeah, vintage. Yeah, I had to be careful there, didn't I? No doubt. Yeah.
Well, Danny, you're a storyteller as a writer, and many of us in the hobby are kind of storytellers unto ourselves with regards to our collection and what's meaningful to us. But hearkening back to my recent experience around the fire pit, it was just they were people that have no connection to the hobby talking about Livy being so excited, but Paul being stoic and nonplussed, and that was meaningful to them. Like the woman in this case felt this strong attachment for tracking down this grail-like card, whereas the dude was just like whatever. And so that story emerges, I think, in collective consciousnesses around the world, and that's I think there's a big part of that in the hobby. It happens in all sorts of different ways for different people on different occasions, but to me that's central to the collecting streak,
without a doubt.
Yeah. Okay, I want to, Danny, unless you have any other insights to share from SI, I said a few before you came on that I was going to tell a story. It was related to the comp discussion, but I want to tell this story of something that happened at my booth at the Toronto Expo. Anything else, Danny, first?
I've got 6 hours saved up for later. Don't worry.
Okay. So we were talking about, and David, I think you'll appreciate this, when we're talking about, people coming up to your booth and, just the way they interact with you, the way they approach and how you're going to respond back to them depending on how they offer you. Do they, they're just trying to grind you? Are they going to show you the lowest comp? So this is not really related to that, but you'll see when I get into. So basically, I have a card in my showcase. This is a raw. It's a leaf card. It's a hockey card with some autographs on it of some Russian-born players. So a leaf hockey product card, and I have a price tag of $100 on the card. And three guys come up to my table, and they're interested in the card as a family or whatever. I don't know exactly. They were, these guys. I think the younger guys were probably in their 30s. The older gentleman was in his 60s or so. I'm just guessing here. And they ask about the card, and I said it's $100. I think it's a fair price for the card. And the one guy, he says, well, would you take $70? I said, no, I take 90. I'll take 10% off my sticker. I'll take $90 for the card. He goes, would you take 75? I said, no, I'm going to stick to 90. He goes, would you take 80? I said, no, I'm really good at, I think I'm going to stick to 90. He goes, I'll give you 85. And I'm thinking to myself, bro, like 85 and buy me a cup of coffee as friends, maybe? Like, can that get you there? Because I'm not coming off, at this point, I am not coming off 90 out of principle. I'm just not coming off it, right? I'm not going to give you to 85. I'm not going to give it to you for 86. At this point, like, you've tried to grind me so hard. It's 90 or you can walk away. So 85 was what they were willing to pay. I will think about it. Maybe we'll come back. Not even 5 minutes later, a buddy of mine, you guys might know him from Instagram. He goes by Sports Card Cartel on Instagram.
Oh,
he comes up to my table and he's looking at a different card that features one of those three autographs. Tretiak, the famous Russian goaltender. And it was a beautiful card. I had a memorabilia auto card. He goes, I like the Tretiak. He goes, I collect Tretiak. I go, yeah, I remember you collect Tretiak. He goes, I like that one. He goes, I forget. Let's say I had $100 on. I go, what do you want? $80 work? He goes, yeah, I can do it. I can do it for 80. I go, hey, I got this triple auto here as well. You can have it for $60. I just and I'm not taking more. You buy it for 60 because. And I told the store, I was like, I am going to sell it for way less than I was willing to take from those other guys just because they pissed me off. $60, it's yours. Do you want? He's like, yeah, I'll take it for that price. For sure, I'll take it. So I call that spite selling. I'm going to spite sell something to you because of an earlier experience I had with somebody else. And it was just kind of like, I kind of laughed at myself. Like, I literally left $25 on the table. I could have got 85 for it, but I'll tell you what, those $60 meant so much more to me than that 85 would have meant to me. And they went to a friend who I know loves it and didn't argue with me on the first card, didn't try to grind me further on the first one. So I'm like, I'll give them both to you for $140. How does that sound? He's like, uh-huh. So first of all, has anyone out there, have you ever spite sold a card like that because you were just that kind of like perturbed by the previous? So I've never told anyone to F off and get out of here on a deal, but I kind of told these guys to F off, although they probably will never know about it. But David, I mean, you're at shows. What have you ever done something like that?
What? So I have a couple of questions. You said there were three of them. So the first question is, was it the Hanson brothers? And the second question was, are we talking about Canadian dollars or US dollars? Because that's a big difference where I'm from. Well,
we are talking Canadian dollars, and no, it was not the Hanson brothers.
I have sold things to other people like that. Sometimes, in fact, I've done it a couple times right in front of the other person. That's how I prefer to do it. Is like you're kind of being a jerk. Will anyone else around here that I know give me something 10% lower than that right now, no questions asked. But I'm not the hardest working guy in the hobby. I'm more known as the, pushing the buttons the most of other people in the hobby.
But you're also
I'm 100% behind that strategy, and I love cartel. So like I would sell cartel pretty much anything at a discount, in a ploy to get him to wear my hats more.
Yeah. Oh shoot, I forget what I was just gonna. Yeah, I had something there. Not, I lost it. Okay. Well, a couple comments that just that did come in. Chris says, "Yeah, night. Well, hey, you know what? Sometimes you do. You got to." Lantern says, "Can't wait to send in a decoy to lowball grind you on a card at the Edmonton Expo, only for me to sneak in later and get a steal." Well, I'm on to you now, though, Lantern. I'm on to you, right? Jacob Thiessen, a grown man tried to grind me down on a $5 card down to $3 and wouldn't budge. So I gave the card away to a kid standing beside him. Yeah. And
that's my guy. Yeah.
That's smart.
Yeah. I like as long as the kid doesn't go sell it to the guy for $3 after that, right? Yeah, I mean, listen, it's not something I make a habit of doing, but had a good show, and there's the hobby's so transactional, and there's so much money involved in the relationships, the discussions, the interactions. Sometimes it's about more than that. It's about how you treat people. It's about how you approach people. And those things can go a long way, whether you're a buyer or a seller at a card show. I mean, it just comes down to like relationships, really. Do you want to, Oh, I remember what I was going to say, David. You said you're not the hardest working guy in the hobby. So you live up to your rule number 1, which I believe states the hobby is lazy. Is that right?
Correct.
Sherry,
the hobby is lazy, guilty.
What's rule number 2?
The hobby is stupid, also guilty. Those are the only 2 rules. Everyone thinks there should be another rule, and I've told them if there is a third rule, the third rule is, when in doubt, refer to rules number 1 and 2, because one or both will be applicable at all times.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else? So anyone else ever spite sell something like that? Because I want to see more of that. Like, I think that's something that could maybe, if word gets out, Danny, more and more people are going to realize, don't do that, because you're going to get spite sold against you.
Well, I'm more of the Jacob theory where, I would just take the card and give it to the kid next to him, or do what you did and sell it to somebody else, and then just wait and pray they come back and ask for that card.
Yes.
That would make my whole show. Financially, I hope you do well, but that guy coming back and asking for the card would make a weekend.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they did not come back, so I couldn't even tell them it had sold. I was kind of upset by that, but that's what didn't happen to me. Tiger Jordan says, never sold for spite, but have removed from showcase. I've done that as well.
I've done that too.
Because you need the opportunities. You got to find the second guy who's going to be interested as well. David right here says, I've also marked them up after someone walks away. Yeah, I've done that. I got to tell one more story where this is the worst, guys. This was the worst. This goes back to 2010, because it was the Jamie Benn of the Dallas Stars. It was his RPA before he ever got hot. That's an 09-10 card. So this would have been probably fall of 2010 at the Toronto Expo. I was prospecting on Jamie Benn. I believed in him, and I picked up like a dozen of his cup RPAs out of 249. Had them in my showcase. This guy comes up to my booth, and he wants to buy one of them. So he starts looking. He's inspecting each and every one of them. He was at my booth for an hour and a half. And I have a busy booth. I had people left, right, and center, and he was always saying, hey, well, like kind of taking time away from other deals. But I thought, listen, I'm going to treat this guy nicely. He's spending what, $150, whatever it was. He wants to make sure he does it right. So I'm not going to diss him or at all. Let him do his thing. I would have if I knew what was about to happen, though. Well, he finally decides on one of the cards he wants. And it's, whatever, probably one of the nicer patches. I don't remember exactly which one it was. A better patch in really good condition after he thoroughly inspected all of them. We're not talking about a $500 or a $5,000 card. We're talking like $150, maybe $180 Canadian. Anyway, at the end of the day, let's say my price, I don't remember exactly, but say my price was $200. He comes in with an offer at 60%, like $120 or something. And I'm like, you know what? I'll do 190. I'll take $10. Like if you come down in that low, I'm coming. My rebuttal, my counter is going to be very small amount off my sticker price. Anyway, I go 190. He's like, yeah, I can maybe come up to 125, maybe 130. I'm like, yeah, 190 is the price. He's like, all right, thank you. Walks away. After spending an hour and a half in my booth, taking my time away from other people. At that point, I started thinking, was he trying to was he a decoy? Was he trying to distract me while his partner was trying to steal off my booth or something? All sorts of weird stuff starts going through your head at that point. But that, and then it's I would not even sell you the card if you came back and offered me full price. It's just not, I'm not even going to sell it to you at that point. So I don't know, maybe I'm a little too hard on people like that, but there comes a point where you've just kind of done something that's it's the straw that broke this guy's back, and there's no coming back from it anymore. So I don't know. Those are few and far between. I've got those are probably the only two experiences I've had like that, 2 in 20 years. So not that bad. I'm not that much of a hard ass really, but in those 2 cases.
I helped set up with Chris Sewell at the Chantilly show, and he does a lot of dollar boxes, $5 boxes. The amount of time people will spend going through the boxes and then negotiating on the dollar cards blows me away. He's got the patience of a saint, because I would be throwing the cards back at people. But there's no respect for the time of the dealer.
Yeah. You have to. Yeah. Had just no courtesy, self-awareness really on that. Joe, you got anything on any response, reactions to any of that?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I've done any spite selling, but I've definitely pulled a card after getting lowballed, and usually that's just a byproduct of me realizing maybe I really don't want to let this card go. It's actually more valuable to me than, I mean, lowball would presume that the card was, they were trying to undercut, but there can be something in both directions, right? I've also been on the side, and, true confession, I've lowballed too. I've tried to get, beyond probably a reasonable deal with someone. It's not me at my finest. It's not something I'm proud of, but I've been in that state where I'm trying to kind of angle or find it for the right price. And sometimes I regret that. Sometimes you're like, no, you know what? You should have just paid what the dealer was offering, and you would have been happy, and you would have, left the show with this card, and it would have been a great addition to your PC. And now you're never going to see it again. So lesson learned. It cuts both ways.
It really does. And sometimes if I'm shopping at a card show and, the price is on the card, $500, and I'm like, you know what? I'd buy it if I could get it for $350, but I don't want to offer $350. I don't feel right about it. And I say to the guy, how much room might you have on that? Again, my least favorite thing to hear when I'm on the other side, but how much room might you have on that? And they might say, well, I might have a bit, make an offer. I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm kind of, I don't want to offend you. You hear that often. I don't want to insult you. And no, well, insult me. I don't take it personally. If you tell me that, I'm going to give you my offer. You're free to say no, but I'm not willing to pay more in many cases. That's my best and final. On the off chance you're going to sell it to me, I'm going to buy that card. But I also don't want to insult. I really don't want to make that insult, because I'm not trying to be insulting. I just disagree with your price. I know what I'm comfortable paying, and you might have that much room. You might be willing to come down to $350 off a $500 price tag instead of $480, coming down $20. So it's kind of, sometimes you just have to judge that situation on its own merit. This guy, what kind of mood are they in? You know, if they're grumpy, I'm not going to make that offer no matter what. If they're friendly and happy to chat with me, and you know they're just having a great time, they're not going to take it as much of an insult like that. They're going to be more negotiable, perhaps. Or there's me like, hey, appreciate the offer, but no, you know, I do like $450, but I can't do $350. That's just not enough for me. No worries, bro. Thank you for being cool. Have a good show. I'll see you later.
A lot depends on the card too. I mean, if it's a little bit of, you know, if it's a card that just has that real super steady, consistent value, and, you know, like, yeah, I know you can get that. And so at that point, trying to lowball feels a little, but if it's something that's, you know, an obscure, you know, like sometimes I'll dabble in the you know, ultra modern basketball card collector, you know, Flux or Recon. It's like, oh, it's a 1-of-1, you know, Flux that's, you know, probably not desired by a huge amount of people in the hobby. Like, let me throw you an offer and see. And in some instances, just like you said, Jay, it's like, yeah, they can come way down. And in other instances, it's like, absolutely not. So, okay, you know, no harm, no foul.
Yeah.
Can I fess up to losing on the other side?
Yeah, let's hear the story.
I was at the National searching for a Koufax rookie, and finally found the perfect one. I walked away on the negotiation, got to lunch later that day, and one of my good friends pulls out a Koufax rookie.
The very one?
The exact one out of the entire National.
Oh.
And pulls it out, and I said, "This is the one from the table." Yep, that was the one. And I've always regretted that. So, Joe, to your comment, you know, don't let a couple dollars ruin the card you really want either.
Can I ask, Danny, what was the delta on what they wanted and what you were like? Was it $350 or $400, or was it $1,500 or $2,000? Like, how far apart were you?
Oh, it's an embarrassing.
Embarrassing.
This was full petty. Principle of the matter. It was under a $50 difference for less than 10% of the value of the card. Yes.
Who got the card? Can you tell us who got the card?
Yeah, well, Mookie gave it away. John Newman.
John Newman got it. Okay, so yeah, but you know, as David Spinrad, the Rated Rabbi, says, at least it stayed in the family. Like, you got to be happy it went to him and not somebody else, right?
Well, that was my question. Are you still friends? Or did you tell him at lunch we are not friends anymore?
I'm a Ravens fan. He's a Steelers fan. He bought my card, so you know we have to overcome these things.
That's hilarious. Well, I'm glad John got it. I mean, you know, it's going to a good home, and yeah, at least you know. So Nick Leach here says they always come back. They didn't in my case, but this was also towards the end of the show. They might not have just made it back. I'm talking about that triple auto. Chris C says, I don't drink Sprite, I drink Spite. Yeah, I mean, I got to tell you, selling that card to the sports card cartel was one of the best feelings I had all weekend after that. Mitch Grotman says someone recently Spite bought a card I wanted because he didn't like me and didn't want me to have it. Jeremy knows the story. Yeah,
I've done that.
I think that happens more and more. He also says first time watching Sports Cards Live in the afternoon. Hello from Japan. Travel safe, Mitch. Very cool. I like this. Yeah, man. Cards. Mo says I should have countered at 210 instead of coming down to 190, right? Go higher. I've started to do that a couple times just for fun, just for, you know, just to see the reaction. You know, I'm asking 200. They say, would you do 150? I go, no, but I'll take 210. I think I learned that from Pawn Stars. I think they do that. I think Rick does that on Pawn Stars quite a bit, right? In his negotiating. Whoa, PG's cardboard says, who in their right mind spends an hour and a half on Jamie Benn? Well, back in 2010, he was prospectable, you know, and then the cards went up. The cards doubled in value eventually. So that guy probably kicked himself for not buying mine. And then now they're worth half of what I was trying to get for or what he offered me, for probably $60 now, maybe $100 Canadian. Bob Boozle says dollar box negotiation is a clinical problem. Right. I mean, Dr. Beckett's famous for telling us how he loves to flip through dollar boxes. I can't imagine that if he's got $15, he's offering 12. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I think
and don't get me wrong, if you're buying hundreds of dollars, we're separate conversation. I'm talking about a handful of cards.
Yes, agree. If it's $15, I'm not, don't offer me 12, just take them for 15 for, like, I don't know. Then some things that enter my mind at times, I traveled all this, like that whole, like, pity me. I traveled all this way. I have to pay my flight, hotel, car rental, booth, showcases, supplies, all these things. Like, I think some vendors, and I've had that go through my mind, I admit it, where it's like, I feel like, don't nickel dime me for $5 on this. If it's $20, just pay 20. Do you need to offer 15? If it says 10, do you need to offer 5 or 8? Plus, like, I only deal in $5 rounds. I'm not dealing in anything for 7, 8, 9. Right? Like, I don't even know if we have coins anymore in Canada here. We have the loonie and the toonie, the $1 and $2 coin. I don't remember the last time I've had one. So, yeah.
Do you have a postal service?
Not right now. Not right now. We don't. No.
Cheap shot. I want to play up the U.S. Canada thing, but it's funny. I just actually on I was checking a tracking order. I was sending something in, and there was a whole thing about we've basically discontinued all orders to Canada, this, that, and there. So it sounds like it's everyone's taking it seriously, including eBay.
Yeah, it is a serious issue up here. I mean, there's a couple of just regular life issues where I can't send money where I need to, or can't receive money, because it's done through the mail. I think the biggest issue is really going to be Christmas, and sending gifts across the country and internationally. Like, I think people are gonna have to wait to get their Christmas gifts or to send them to their families. And I wonder what that's going to do to the general shopping spirit here.
So basically, here's your chance, flippers. You can become, like, those of you who live in the North, you could become like card mules. So you just let Jeremy know right now that you are available. You have a valid U.S. passport and a valid driver's license. Get the word out, and you could just start huffing it back and forth across the border with just like stacks of cards.
But David, I think they're kind of tight. Like, Jeremy, better than I do, but I mean, I've heard you sort of discuss your considerations as you cross the border, and I mean, it sounds like they do take that seriously, right?
It's a pain crossing the border with cards, especially if you're going to a card show and you have them. And I mean, I'm flagged. Like, they ask me, I go to customs going into the US now. They don't ask me where are you going? What's the purpose? They ask the first question they ask me is, do you have any sports collectibles on you? They ask me straight out. They know I come up as a sports collectible guy from US Customs. So I'm on the radar already. And I'm okay with it. Like, you know what? Basically, I just don't bring cards into the US anyway. I go to cards shows now. I'm not bringing cards with me. I just don't want to deal with it. I could get a customs broker and go set up and do it that way. And maybe I will eventually, It's not like you can't do it. The other thing about the postal strike right now is that, if you're patient, it could be a time to get some good deals, right? Because you can just let your sellers wait to ship until the strike is over. That's one thing. And then Slab Sharks, which is Canada's by far biggest consignment service, they are shipping despite the strike. They have found alternate ways to do it, whether it's UPS or there's something called Chit Chats. Like, there are other ways. I just got something in the mail well, not in the mail, but it's something, the 2 cards I showed at the top of the show, I don't know where I put them now. I got those. They came yesterday via a Canadian eBay purchase I made. So, as someone who is a director with Slab Sharks and I buy cards from them, I'm glad to know. And I have clients selling through them on consignment. I'm really glad to know that they're shipping despite the strike. So don't be afraid to buy from Slab Sharks in Canada right now. And as far as other sellers go, just read their read the description, see what they're doing. They should be talking about in the description what they're doing to navigate the strike, if they're still even selling anything right now. So it's interesting. A couple comments on that, and then we'll go to you guys. We'll wrap this up soon, guys. First of all, Lantern says those ComC dollar box guys will get you. Yeah,
Oh my God, they so will.
they will. But you know what? Some of them
there's a star
great.
Yeah, will you? How about $1?
Some of them are good buddies. Like 2 guys in particular are good buddies of mine that are ComC dollar box guys, and I don't mind. Like when I'm good, I don't mind if they're. And listen, I don't really have dollar box stuff anyway, but those guys get good scores. People are willing to work with them. You know, you don't have to, but like I'm not going to work much with those, but some people do. Bob says the Postal Service always ruins Christmas. Carvin Chung says, I guess there is no UPS, FedEx, DHL, maybe Polar Express. Well, there is all those UPS, FedEx, Purolator, and we're using those up here right now. Nick says, surely there is alternative shipping. Yes, there is. There is alternative shipping, guys. But I'm just saying, like, because of just the general feeling out there that, you know, because I've seen message board discussions saying, I'm halting everything on eBay. I'm not buying, I'm not selling. Well, thank you for not buying, because I'm going to get some better deals because you're on the sidelines now and you're likely not alone. Carvin says, call me an American now. Fair enough, Carv. Good to see you, Carv, by the way. Carvin Chung of Exquisite fame, inventor of Exquisite, the cup, among others. Immaculate Black. The man is a legend in our hobby. Any responses to any of that, guys, before we're coming up on 3 hours. I like to keep this this new Saturday. By the way, this is the new SCL on Saturday night, guys. Kind of new format. We got people kind of coming, shifting in and out. I think we have about 4 or 5 people tonight. Dan the Card Man was supposed to come on, but apparently he has no internet from the card show he is at. And we had another person have to kind of cancel not the last minute, but a couple days ago. So, you know, we're going to continue to bring on some different people, some repeats, and I'm excited about it, guys. I'm excited. David, Danny, I hope you guys can be a part of this going into the future. You're welcome back again for sure. I got Joe with me here, my buddy from Joe Poirot from Santa Cruz. You've heard me saying that before. If you notice on the thumbnail for these episodes, there's a palm tree with a surfboard on it. That's the tribute to Joe. If you ever wondered, that was the tribute to Joe, you guys. David, you noticed that?
I did, yes.
Yeah. Any sort of final?
I like the Sprite hat.
I had to pull this out with Spite versus Sprite, you know.
Nice. Danny, anything else on your mind right now, hobby-wise?
This is a blast. I think we should do another 3 hours.
Okay, we will next Saturday, I promise.
No, I just think that it's a really cool thing to see the hobby strong for the younger, modern, vintage, older. It just seems like we're getting to a good place all the way around, and that's exciting.
Right on. David, what about you? Anything else on your mind tonight that you want to air out?
Yes. Cage is afraid of coming on the show with me because the Astros are still the Yankees' daddies, while Mookie and the Dodgers took on that step-parent role this year.
So you're calling out Cage?
Yes, I'm absolutely calling out Cage.
Wow.
Yeah. I like Cage, but he's afraid to do anything where I'm at because he probably gets cooked. What else?
He'll be back.
And I've been buying a lot of raw cards lately. I don't know about you guys. I don't know why. I don't know how that happened, but I have a stack of about 250 cards that now I gotta get rid of some of them because they're not going to necessarily grade out. But yeah, I've been busy with that, and it led me to the
what
eBay
era? Like what years are these from?
For me, the raw card stuff, I'm really only will buy like ultra modern or for me, ultra modern is like 2020 and later. Modern is before that, and then preceded by junk wax. So, and I kind of draw that line around 2010 or so. So I put a lot of modern stuff because I'm trying to track down cards that I like of Mookie or some like a lot of the other baseball guys.
And you're talking about like standard like 35 point thickness cards. You're not talking about memorabilia cards, are you?
Not a ton of memorabilia cards, although I have been kind of dabbling, as I mentioned in the chat, with some of the jersey, the patch cards that have the MLB logo on them. I'm spending an inordinate amount of time on MLB checking the authentication because usually when Topps gets it and you go, it tells you what the original number was on it and when they replaced it to put it in a card. And sometimes you have to go all the way back to that to get the game to know that it's from. But I've become sort of I don't know, a psycho in terms of trying to hunt down home run game jersey patches. And I'm finding some pretty good success with that. And they're like super cheap, under $10 for some of these guys from games where all-stars hit a home run. And I think that is a really great value, especially in comparison to like NFL and NBA. If you had an all-star who scored 40 points in an NBA game, and you knew that patch was from that jersey, those clowns would pay $800 for that. And I'm buying the equivalent baseball guy for under $10, like all day, right? Yeah.
Shots fired on the clowns comment too.
I'm here for all of it.
I know. Good, Joe. What about you? Anything come to mind before we wrap up? We'll do a few get your final comments in, guys, into the chat. We'll run through those. And I had one other thing I was going to maybe do. Maybe we'll do one of them. Stupid buy it now prices on eBay. I got two of them. Interesting ones. I'm going to share them before, but first to Joe, then we'll do that, then comments, and we'll end it. Anything else, Joe, on your mind?
I was just going to say, I too was surprised that Cage was reluctant to show his face tonight. And I thought he had a little more courage in him, but, maybe a little time for him to kind of, refuel the jets. He'll be here ready to, the lawyers like to argue. So I'd imagine I'm not counting him out. He's out tonight, but I'm not counting him completely out. Meanwhile, Danny, I really want to commend what's going on over there at the SI Collectible Collect. A lot of people that I'm connected with have sent me links to those articles, and they are fantastic. And anybody that hasn't gone on that site should go on that site. And I commend you and the writing team for, amplifying the hobby and both for new collectors and for old. There's substantive articles on there that have me learning things. And so I just really appreciate that. I know that the writer's work is not necessarily compensated and or acknowledged in the same way that some art forms are. So I just really appreciate that. And you mentioned Chris Sewell, who is someone that I feel like has an infinite amount of wisdom. And I know Jay Lee has a connection with him. Maybe we can get Chris on here one night. That'd be pretty fun to get him on a live. So those are my thoughts.
For sure.
And thank you for the kind words. And he lives down the street from me, so I'll throw rocks at his door.
Do it. Yeah.
Put my name on one of them. So we'll put the Sports Cards Live logo on there. Okay. So actually, before I do what I was going to do, we had a question from Foul Ball. He says, David, can you explain what year's junk wax was? It sounded like you said pre-2010 is junk wax, but you said modern and then junk wax, I think, didn't you?
Yeah, to me, we're in the ultra modern era. Modern, for me, goes back to kind of that, maybe I'd call it 10 to 15 years in front of ultra modern, and that's going to move for as we go forward, I think, right? So I'm going to define ultra modern as 4 to 5 years going backwards from whatever date I'm at. Junk wax for me is like 1980 through, I mean, sometime in the 2000s, I would say. Maybe 2010's a little too late. But I'm not sure what else I'd call it.
Well, I did, David. I did a whole episode. I did a good hour, 15 minutes on this exact topic earlier this week. You should check it out because there's a lot. It's actually, it was a pretty interesting discussion. The chat was all over it too. Check it out. But junk wax, I really think ends at about like 93, 94, and then it becomes something because the production volumes just came way down after like 93, 94. So it doesn't go. I don't believe, for me. I'm not gonna. You define how you want, but for me, it really gets it changes in like as late as 95, let's say. But just my thoughts. Okay, let's stop there, guys. Really quick, I just want to show you a couple really what I think are funny eBay buy it nows. I like to call them stupid buy it nows on eBay. This is a 1990-91 Fleer error misprint Michael Jordan. The ask is, it's only $39,800. You might get it for $39,700. I'm just saying, but that's what you get. You get basically a decoy on one side, and on the other side, you get the back of the Jordan card from 1990 Fleer, right in the heart of junk wax. $39,800. Guys, stupid eBay buy it now price right there. I don't care how rare or misprint is this, and if somebody pays it, stupid buyer. I'm just going to be blunt and say, it makes no sense to me. Danny, you look dumbfounded right there. David, I know you see comedy in it, and Joe, you're soaking it in.
That thing's just
I want to know why they have a screw down holder.
Well, because it's a clear error misprint.
It's from 1991.
It's been in there. It's been in that screw down since 91. This is their big cash out.
This was the moment. Yeah, this was the moment to retire. This is the moment to really, Bahamas. Who knows?
Well, there we have. So there's that one. I mean, this one just and people send me these. If you have any of these that you think you find them, send them to me. We'll feature them on a show. It's just all in good fun. But Captain Rucksack with 664 feedback, 100 positive, is looking for $39,800. There's 14 people watching this. I got to think all 14 are doing it just because it's funny. And then the other one, this one, the guy actually did some good work on. It's a 1990 Topps Ken Griffey Jr. The ask is $800,000. Simply, and look at the great extent he goes through to circle all the places that the card is like out of registration. Shows you, like, look, that is you need your readers for that, but unless I'm missing something, this is simply a card that was out of focus on the print. And Joe Chua wants $800K for this. And even the description is pretty good. Tons of pictures, like all these pictures on what should be a dollar card, but in the description below, it's truly a one-of-a-kind 1990 Griffey, a crazy amount of misprints, making this truly a one-of-a-kind, no doubt a unique collectible for any true collector at $800,000. It's ungraded, but excellent condition. Comes from the original owner. Don't be fooled by these other listings claiming to be rare and one-of-a-kind. They are not. If you're truly looking for truly rare, one-of-a-kind Ken Griffey Jr. Topps rookie, you found it here on my list. I circled all the errors I found, but there may be more. The second card is how the original print should be. I kind of have, truly one of a kind, see photos and you will see why. I mean, I gotta kind of think this might be a joke. I'm not, that naive to think this might just be a bit of a prank. But if it isn't,
that's a lot of work.
David?
I'm messaging, do you have room, bro, right now?
Danny, what were you saying?
That's just a lot of work to put into the listing, whether it's real or fake. Somebody needs a job, a hobby, a girlfriend.
800 grand, maybe they need.
Right.
My curiosity is what would eBay authentication do with this? Would they, and would the buyer have any recourse if it didn't live up, if there was something off in the description in terms of the card and what was advertised? But yeah, I feel
all right, guys. There we have a couple of stupid eBay buy it now. Sean Red says, great show. Chris C, thanks for the show. Spite selling is going to spill over into revenge repacks. There you go. There you go. Bob Boozle says, David just planted his flag on Cage's field. WWF style. Nick Leach. Bob Boozle quotes David in 2024. Let me sell these cards to some clowns. Laura, great show. Jeremy and Entourage, informative, entertaining, and all are welcome on my lawn. Thank you, Laura. Always a great positive force in the chat. David G, loving the new format. Thank you, David. Appreciate that. It's important to hear that because I want to keep it going. Terp says, Adley Rutschman, Topps Chrome rookie card patch auto, has an MLB authentic sticker, and when you trace it, he hit a home run in the game that jersey is from. That's pretty cool. That's a nice little added bonus.
He's not the only one. Topps Chrome actually has several guys, but you got to look them up.
That's cool. D Nick says, love the show as always. Hit those like buttons, everybody. Thank you very much, D Nick. Foul ball, we did. Bob Boozle, my wife will have to read me some of Danny's articles after the show. Mookie says, super fun, guys. Loving the new format and energy. Look forward to many more. Thank you, Mookie. Appreciate the support. Yankees fan, great show. Thank you, D Nick. Junk wax applies to specific sports, though. I think it applies to the four big ones: hockey, basketball, baseball, football, but maybe no more. Terp says so many great cards came from the early 80s. No doubt. So many greats, not cards, so many greats. Bob Boozle, my wife was at her best 2000 to 2012. After that, junk wax. Bob Boozle, always good for a laugh. Jacob Thiessen says mid-80s to 93 for junk wax. I agree. Chris C says 85 to 94, a little bit wider than I like, but I get it. Nick Leach says painting with a banana and duct tape sold for several millions, and buyers are bananas, so it seems like a bargain. Fair. Jacob Thiessen, maybe if it was a blank Jordan rookie, maybe. Dog food soup, it's a screw down because that's how the card was actually created. It's not a misprint. The front is just fused to the second screw down holder. Could be. Bob Boozle says that Griffey card has been examined by a blood spotter expert. Dog food soup, I wouldn't pay $1 more than $274K for the Griffey. Money laundering 101. Great bargain, says Chris. Hey, there you go. Could be a reasonable, plausible explanation. D-Nick says, so these are the guys trying to sell their stuff on Facebook Marketplace, most likely. Bob Boozle says, I'll trade him a Sandy Koufax I got for free at the National. Good. Laura says, Nick, I heard there is a sequel. All right, guys, we are going to wrap this one up pretty much now. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Really happy you all did. All of our guests as well. I don't usually say this, so I will let somebody else say it.
For more awesome content, like and subscribe now.
I couldn't find the please, but like and subscribe now. Danny, thank you for jumping on. Pleasure to have you. Hang tight. David, glad to have you back again. Love the angles you bring. We'll get you back on. Thank you. Joe, always great to have you here. Partnered up with me, guys. I'll let you say goodbye, and then I'm gonna hit end stream. So say your goodbyes.
Goodbyes.
Bye, guys.
Bye, Hobby family.
All right, guys. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Remember, these are available on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts, guys. And with that, this episode of Sports Cards Live on November the 30th, 2024 is now over.
Connection terminated.